Chapter 1: A Scrumptious Meal. Ashlock stirred from his slumber as someone entered the courtyard. Even though he had been reincarnated in this bizarre new world 2 years ago, Ashlock doubted he would even get used to sleeping as a tree. Demonic Spirit Sapling, Age 2. Chi Realm, First Stage. Sacrifices for complete system unlock, 30/50ths. Ashlock dismissed the system with a sigh. I have been in this world for 2 years, yet I have only been awake for like an hour in total? So sleepy. A second ago, he had been surrounded by a raging snowstorm in the depths of winter, but now the slothful tree was greeted with a gentle summer breeze that rustled his scarlet leaves. Yet, even though it had only been a second of sleep for his mortal mind, it took a moment for his tree body to wake up from hibernation. Still half asleep, the tree basked in the sun's warmth on his black bark for a while before finally opening his non-existent eyes and looking around to find the human that interrupted his sleep. His sight was limited to a few meters in every direction, just enough to see the end of a stone walkway flanked by dark purple grass overgrown with weeds. He could also see himself. But what was he? Well, according to the floating words in his mind that accompanied him for the last year, he was a demonic spirit sapling. Ignoring the rude man that had interrupted his sleep, Ashlock summoned his status page. Demonic Spirit Sapling, Age 2. Chi Realm, First Stage. Skills: Devour C. Basic Spirit Sight F. Basic Meditation F. Sacrifices for complete system unlock, 30/50ths. When Ashlock died back on Earth, he asked his friend to bury him under the enormous tree in his local park. It always gave him a certain feeling when he sat on the park bench under its canopy, like a warm welcome home. Seems a year has passed. Ashlock spoke to himself since nobody could hear him. When he first arrived in this alien world, he tried to talk to the humans who occasionally passed within his limited sight range, but they never reacted, no matter how much he yelled. The man waited patiently in front of him, but sadly not only was Ashlock's spirit sight limited, but it was also blurry. Like looking through frosted glass, he could make out the shapes and colors, but any fine details were beyond him. The fuck do you want, random guy? I have nothing to offer. I am a tree, for God's sake. Ashlock had no idea why, but this man came by every so often with a sacrifice to offer him as if he was some patron deity. After a minute, the man sat down in a cross-legged position and left the rabbit-looking creature he was holding on the ground. Then, as blood trickled out of the rabbit's slit neck onto the purple grass, Ashlock felt a familiar feeling. Hunger. Without thinking, he activated his Devour skill. Black vines covered in tiny thorns surged from the ground like waiting vipers and wrapped around the rabbit corpse, mummifying it. The black vine pulsed with energy as the thorns bit into the rabbit's soft flesh and pumped out the blood. Before Ashlock even realized it, the vines loosened up and retreated under the ground, and he felt a rush of power. It was small, but compared to the minuscule energy he absorbed through his meditation skill from the sun, the devoured rabbit gave a week's worth of energy all at once. Ashlock resisted the urge to use Devour on the sitting man. There was no requirement that the target had to be dead. They simply had to be in range and ideally stationary. Ashlock knew the man would give him a lot more energy than the rabbit, perhaps enough to finally reach the second stage of the Chi Realm, whatever that meant. But alas, Ashlock was no fool and knew the man wouldn't take being devoured kindly. The man said some unintelligible words, patted his bark, and left. Ashlock checked his status and sure enough, the number of sacrifices obtained for the system unlock had increased by 1. Sacrifices for complete system unlock, 31/50ths. Ashlock had no clue what complete system unlock meant. He had read many novels and played games back on Earth. Wait, maybe this was still Earth. The people who visited him were odd, and the creatures looked slightly off, but his vision was so poor it was hard to tell. I think it is safe to assume I'm in another world, though. Never heard of anyone cultivating back on Earth. And with that thought, Ashlock activated his basic meditation skill. The energy that was chaotically rampaging through his trunk began to calm. Ashlock had no clue how the skill worked, but it allowed him to somewhat control the energies within while also absorbing some chi from the sun. If only it wasn't so slow. Ashlock had been here for a year, and even with over 30 sacrifices and constant basic meditation, he hadn't seen much improvement. Except his trunk had grown a little taller, he was now the height of an average man. But don't trees grow naturally? Sure, I am growing a little fast, but nothing that couldn't happen on Earth. Maybe my bark has also gotten harder. Difficult to test. Ashlock tried not to think about it, but he was terrified. What if the man needed some firewood? Or some otherworldly monster snuck into the area he was in? Unfortunately, apart from his devour ability, he could not fight back. Deciding such thoughts were pointless as there was nothing he could do, Ashlock entered his state of meditation once more, and the world drifted away. 3 This time, Ashlock saw a trio enter his field of view. A small person. Ashlock was only around the man's height, so unless he had rapidly grown in stature, one of them was likely a child. Or midget. What if there are dwarves in this world? Honestly, Ashlock had zero clue about this world. Maybe one day, he could learn more. If only I could hear them speak, it would make my life much easier. Ashlock sighed in his mind as he observed the 3 people. Wait. Is that a girl? One of the 3 had long blonde hair flowing out of their black cloak like a cape. The other 2 were clearly male, and how they were a step behind the female suggested a potential subservient nature to their relationship. The girl was holding a bag tightly in her hands which the other 2 seemed interested in. Of course, Ashlock was also interested in the contents of the bag. Although he time skipped when he meditated so he could avoid the weeks or months of boredom, he was still starving for some entertainment. Oddly, the system seems to wake me up when someone comes within my range. Will that be an issue when my basic spirit sight upgrades and I can see further? These were questions for another time as the girl had opened the bag and brought out a decapitated head. The 2 other men seemed just as surprised as Ashlock. They both took a step back and drew out some type of long weapon, likely a sword, but Ashlock's blurry vision made it hard to tell. The only reason he could tell the girl took out a head from the bag was that he recognized it. It was the head of the man who had given him the rabbit last time. A slight tinge of disgust and regret bloomed in the back of Ashlock's mind. The man had been just a blurry figure, but he had provided him with food. Wait, am I some kind of dog that wags its tail for food? Fuck that. Ashlock dismissed the feeling and focused on the action. The girl dropped the decapitated head on the floor by Ashlock's exposed roots, and he could feel the fabric of her cloak as she backed up against his trunk. Blue energy illuminated the 2 swords like lightsabers in Ashlock's basic spirit sight, and they swung forward. Wait! Ashlock screamed as 2 arcs of blue light surged toward him. The girl deflected the 2 incoming attacks with her palm empowered with a purple light. She then acquired 2 daggers from God knows where and lunged at the man to the left. The man kicked back surprisingly quickly and vanished from Ashlock's sight. It was bizarre to only watch one side of the fight. The girl fought just on the edge of his perception. Purple energy flickered across her hands like a flame as she deflected attacks from 2 sides. Then she dove to the left, dodging a blast of blue energy that disintegrated her hood and some free-flowing hair. There was just one slight issue. The blast kept going toward a defenseless tree. Ashlock screamed as the blinding beam of blue light smashed into one of his branches, obliterating it in a shower of splinters. Ashlock watched in horror as his branch tumbled to the ground beside him. Strangely, Ashlock felt nothing except the escape of energy like a popped balloon, so he quickly tried to seal the hole. Chi that he had stored in his trunk surged toward the blockage and slowly knitted the spot closed. I'm alive. Ashlock didn't know what he expected. It's not like trees bleed to death or something. Ashlock then watched as purple energy enveloped his fallen branch and hurled it outside his vision. The girl was clearly the culprit as she dashed after the flying branch, and then Ashlock saw nothing. Sadly, Ashlock had no clue how the fight was going as it all happened outside his 1-meter range. A few minutes passed until someone stepped back into his field of view. The girl's black cloak was soaked in blood, and the 2 daggers in her hands dripped blood onto the purple grass, which made Ashlock feel hungry. If he could lick his lips, he would. She pocketed her daggers somewhere and then dragged 2 bodies into view. The 2 men were covered in cuts, and one was clearly missing a hand. It was the most heinous thing Ashlock had ever seen, but he felt nothing but hunger. Which was disturbing, to say the least. Where had his humanity gone? The girl said something he couldn't hear before dumping the 2 bodies up against his trunk next to the decapitated head. She also brought over his branch. She then collapsed against his trunk, looking up at his canopy. A while passed and Ashlock couldn't hold back his hunger any longer. The desire to devour overtook his mind, and a swarm of black vines mummified the various offerings, including the branch. The sound of metal snapping surprised Ashlock as his vines broke the swords into small pieces and dissolved them by secreting a corrosive fluid. The process was slow. An hour passed, and the girl seemed to grow impatient, leaving the courtyard. Days went by as the courtyard experienced the cycle of the sun and moon a total of 4 times. Ashlock had turned his brain off to the passage of time, so the sudden rush of euphoria caught him off guard. Demonic Spirit Sapling, Age, 2. Chi Realm, 2nd Stage. Skills. Devour C. Basic Spirit Sight F. Basic Meditation F. Sacrifices for complete system unlock, 56/50ths. Oh. I finally reached the 2nd stage of the Chi Realm. Ashlock felt energy shoot up his roots and an immense fatigue wash over him. Unlocking sign in system. He resisted with all his mental fortitude, but he soon fell asleep. Chapter 2, The Wooden Stick Incident. The courtyard was desolate, a cold breeze rustled Ashlock's scarlet leaves as his mind slowly awoke from a long sleep. Ashlock jolted awake as a sound similar to a ding resounded in his head. In confusion, Ashlock read the string of words that materialized in his mind. Idolatry Daily Sign in System. Day, 1050. Daily Credit, 1050. Sacrifice Credit, 6. Sign in. Sign in. Ashlock stared at the question. Oh right, the system unlocked. Despite months passing, to Ashlock, it had felt like a short nap. So my system is a sign in system. Ashlock had read many novels back on Earth and a sign in system was common. They rewarded the system user for remaining in a certain location for a long time by providing escalating rewards with each passing day. Eventually, all these wastrel young masters that had been banished to the cold palace, never to be seen again, returned after 100 years as an undisputed existence with enough wealth and power to rule a nation. But Ashlock was a tree. What use were weapons, cultivation pills, or immense wealth to a tree stuck in a courtyard? Well, on the plus side, if the rewards increase over time, I can sleep away until I gain something useful to me. Like maybe some new skills? Or a way to cultivate faster. Ashlock accepted the fate that he would spend a lot of time talking to himself about various things. The question is, how long until he went mad? Maybe he was already mad. He had consumed humans for nutrition and hadn't batted an eye. Seeing no harm in trusting the system, Ashlock decided to sign in. Sign in successful, 1056 credits consumed. Unlocked an A- grade skill, Eye of the Tree God. Eye of the Tree God? Ashlock's brain buzzed as the darkness that shrouded him vanished, and his view range rapidly expanded in all directions. Ugh! Ashlock tried to close his eyes in a vain attempt to block out the world, but alas, he had no eyes. He could only suffer as his mind was overloaded with more visual stimuli than he had ever endured when he was human. Deciding there was no other way out from the onslaught, Ashlock chose the easy way out and fell asleep. Idolatry Daily Sign in System. Day, 1051. Daily Credit, 1. Sacrifice Credit, 0. Sign in. Ashlock awoke as he felt the presence of a girl he was familiar with. Confused, he spread his spiritual sight and realized the courtyard was empty. Where is she? Ashlock focused on the feeling, and his worldview shifted to an aerial view. Wow! Ashlock looked down at a small tree in the central courtyard of a Chinese-style pavilion. It was the size of an adult with beautiful red leaves and rugged obsidian bark. Is this the power of the Eye of the Tree God skill? Ashlock zoomed out, and now an entire mountain was in view. A lone girl with flowing blonde hair climbed up 1,000 steps to the pavilion's entrance. Ashlock recognized her as the girl who had helped him unlock his system all those months ago. Ashlock watched for a bit longer, but from the aerial view, she was a tiny speck climbing a very tall mountain. It kinda feels like watching drone or CCTV footage. Ashlock hummed to himself as he rotated and moved the view to look at the pavilion from all sides. The massive pavilion was built atop the mountain with walls of pristine white stone topped with black wood roofs. There were also red vines covering the mountain and growing up the walls. Other than the central courtyard containing Ashlock's body, there were another 4 courtyards with varying features. One included a herb garden with many exotic plants, another had a large pond with fish similar to koi swimming around. Ashlock also spotted a training courtyard with a sandy-looking floor and training dummies made of wood. The final one had a raised stone platform covered in strange runes. During the tour of his home, Ashlock also spotted a few humans walking past the pavilion's windows. So there are other humans here. Why does their presence not awaken me like the girl? A mystery for another time. Ashlock started to feel a strain on his mind, so he cancelled out the Eye of the Tree God skill. I can't use it all the time. A shame. Hopefully, through training, I can use it for longer periods or perhaps increase my view range. Then Ashlock remembered the sign in notification. As if on cue, it reappeared and Ashlock chose to sign in. Sign in successful, 1 credit consumed. Unlocked an F-grade item, wooden stick. A wooden stick? Ashlock was baffled. Compared to the last reward, this was almost insulting. Shouldn't the reward scale with time? Was the first reward a first-time sign in bonus or something? Ashlock thought back to the system messages and discovered the reason. It consumed my credits. I had 1056 last time but only 1 today. So I get rewarded for accumulating credits first before signing in. This would need more investigation. But where is my wooden stick? Ashlock looked around himself, but there were no wooden sticks. Just purple grass and his black roots. Then, as if the system detected his thoughts, a large empty space within himself was revealed, and inside this space was a singular wooden stick. Is this a pocket dimension? Ashlock concentrated on the stick, and to his shock, it vanished from his pocket dimension and materialized a meter from himself in the purple grass. Ashlock tried to summon the stick back, but nothing happened. A few minutes passed with Ashlock glaring at the wooden stick and shouting random commands in his mind, hoping to get the wooden stick back. Finally, giving up, Ashlock noticed he could now see the entire courtyard with his regular sight rather than just a meter. He could even sense the movement of a person through the walls. And they were heading straight toward him. A sliding wooden door revealed it was the blonde girl with magical abilities that killed the 2 men. She wore a thick winter-style black robe with a single red lotus sewn on its chest area. Moving gracefully, she followed the cobbled walkway through the purple grass and past the wooden stick. She paused, and then with a tilt of her head, she bent down and picked up the stick. Only now, as she ran her finger across its surface, Ashlock noticed a significant issue with the stick. It was too perfect. As if it was a PNG out of a video game. Both ends were perfectly cut, something not achievable in reality, and its surface was smoother than glass. A sly smile appeared on the girl's face. By her height and features, Ashlock discerned she couldn't be older than 10, but the memory of her murdering 2 men in cold blood and revealing a decapitated head was fresh in his mind. Did she notice me? Fuck. As a magical man-eating tree, Ashlock was lacking in combat capabilities. She stepped closer, and Ashlock debated casting his Devour skill. Before he knew it, she had closed the gap and patted his trunk with a smile. She spoke a few words that Ashlock couldn't understand, but she seemed happy about something. Then, to Ashlock's relief, the girl turned to leave with the stick. Purple flames flickered across her body, and to Ashlock's shock, she teleported back inside the building using a mysterious movement technique. Show off. Ashlock grumbled. With the crisis averted, he felt more determined than ever to grow stronger. I hope my next sign in bonus is a better meditation technique. Sadly, with how his system functioned, it was the god's will to decide his fate. He could spend years accumulating credits just to cash in and unlock a worthless item like a sword. What the hell could I use a sword for anyway? Before his intense training session, involving a lot of sleeping, Ashlock checked his status page. Demonic Spirit Sapling, age, 2. Chi Realm, 2nd. Stage. Skills. Eye of the Tree God. Devour C. Basic Meditation F. So weak. Should I sleep until I reach the next realm? Ashlock scowled at his F-grade meditation skill. Why did I get some dumb eye skill and a wooden stick? Increasing my meditation speed and becoming a godlike tree would be way better. Taking one final look around the courtyard, Ashlock activated his meditation skill and felt the trickle of ambient chi through his leaves as he felt his mind drift away. Unknown to the sleeping tree, the young girl gleefully left the mountaintop pavilion with the wooden stick in her hand. Chapter 3 Aura of Fear. Chi Realm, 3rd stage achieved. Deactivating sleep mode. A surge of energy like the world's biggest caffeine rush awoke the slothful tree from its long slumber. Summer was in full swing, and the fluff of a bright blue bird resting happily on one of the tree's many sturdy branches frizzled out like it had been electrocuted as ambient chi rushed out into the surroundings. The bird's muscles tensed up, and it tumbled to the ground like a rock. Luckily, the lush purple grass broke its fall. But then black vines erupted from the soil and mummified the bird. The poor thing squeaked like a dog toy as the air was crushed out of its lungs, and its bones crumbled into powder as the vines tightened their python-like grip. A girl lying under the tree's canopy enjoying the shade from the relentless sun's rays stopped twirling a dagger in her hand and watched the bird being eaten alive while humming. +1 SC. Who? Ashlock felt the rush of energy subside, and he could focus again. Huh? SC? Does that stand for sacrifice credits? Ashlock let off a yawn as he spread out his spiritual sight. The vibrant colors of summer flooded his mind. Wait, Wasn't it the start of winter when I fell asleep? The rapid passage of time still baffled the poor human mind stuck in a tree, but with every passing season, he felt more tree than human. How could one treat life the same when months pass by in the blink of an eye? Since a lot of time had passed, Ashlock decided now was a great time to sign in. Idolatry Daily Sign-in System. Day, 1238. Daily Credit, 187. Sacrifice Credit, 1. Sign in. Yes. Sign in successful, 188 credits consumed. Unlocked a B-grade skill, Language of the World. Not bad. I think Ashlock would rather gain some combat abilities, but language was a good step in his pursuit of knowledge. Tree, are you awake? Ashlock mentally jumped in shock. Who said that? He scanned around himself, but the courtyard was empty. The other scions would laugh if I said my only friend was a tree. Looking down at his base, Ashlock finally saw the culprit. It was the psycho girl. Fuck's sake, can she just leave me in peace? Ashlock enjoyed his peace and quiet. Months may have passed for the unknown girl, but he had seen her for almost all his brief moments of consciousness. Tree, are you hungry? I tried to feed you during the winter, but you were sleeping. Ashlock had no way to answer. He was a tree. Did she expect him to drop an acorn on her head or spell out answers in the dirt? Just go away so I can sleep again. The girl watched his rustling leaves and seemed to reach some bizarre conclusion. Okay, I will get you a snack. Ashlock watched purple energy erupt in a blaze across her pale skin. But, to his surprise, it didn't burn her thin black dress. She then retrieved a beautiful black dagger and wrapped it in her purple energy. Hold on, is that dagger handle made of the stick she stole from me? Ashlock didn't get a chance to examine it closely as the dagger shot out of her hand like a bullet. A thin line of purple followed it. Then, as if she was fishing, she reeled the purple line back. And impaled on the end of the dagger was a very plump bird. Here. The girl plopped the bird down and stood to leave. I will leave you to your meal as I have some cultivating to catch up on. Bye. Ashlock felt his opinion of the girl rise. She may be noisy, but at least she provides snacks. Ashlock cast his Devour skill. +1 SC. Sign in. Nothing happened. Oh, yay. I can only do it once a day. Being a tree was boring sometimes. Status. Demonic Spirit Sapling, age, 3. Chi Realm, 3rd stage. Skills. Eye of the Tree God A. Language of the World B. Devour C. Basic Meditation F. 3 years on this planet, and I'm still weak. Ashlock felt frustrated, but then a funny thought crossed his mind. How did all those other sign-in system protagonists survive the boredom? At least I can sleep the years away. Ashlock decided it had been a long day, so he started meditating and fell asleep. Tree, my father failed his breakthrough to the Star Core realm. The girl had built a makeshift bench next to Ashlock's largest root and was twirling the obsidian wood dagger between her fingers. He is now a cripple. Those vultures of the other peaks may set their eyes on my red vine peak soon. Ashlock listened to the girl's mutterings in silence. He was going to go insane. Every day, she ended her training and wandered over to interrupt his sleep. But what she spoke of today differed from her usual ramblings about sect politics. Instead, today she spoke of her father, which was one of the many questions Ashlock wished to ask. Why is a girl living alone in such a massive pavilion atop a mountain? Is she cursed or something? Ashlock had observed that the other people in the pavilion were mortal servants. They didn't awaken him due to their lack of presence. Furthermore, their souls let out such minuscule amounts of ambient chi it was hardly noticeable even when they walked up to him. From this, Ashlock had concluded they weren't cultivators like the girl. But there had been those blue energy cultivators here previously until the girl killed them. But why did she kill them, and why are there only the girl and these mortals here? Ashlock had gained information about the world through snippets of the girl's rambles. Such as this mountain is called the Red Vine Peak, and apparently, there were other peaks. Luckily, Ashlock was a tree. So human politics had little effect on him. Time passed. Tree, why do people important to me all have to die and leave me alone? The girl had red eyes as she buried her head into her knees. Being a tree sounds nice. Do you have any worries? Many. Ashlock wanted to say, but she couldn't hear him. It seemed the girl's father had died due to complications from failing to reach the next realm. News that his home may be changing ownership terrified him. The girl was a bit bizarre, but he felt she was safe to trust. What if the next owner saw an ominous tree dominating the central courtyard as an eyesore and chose to chop him down? After all, over the last few years, he rapidly grew to over 10 meters. He was like a beacon lording over the entire courtyard. Demonic Spirit Sapling, age, 4. Chi Realm, 3rd stage. Skills. Still stuck at the 3rd stage and considered a sapling. Progress was slow. Unbearably slow. If not for the girl looking older and the passing of seasons, Ashlock would think the system was lying to him. Tree. I have to go fight in a tournament to keep this place. Ashlock sighed mentally. He had accumulated a lot of daily credits and was saving them for an emergency, and in his eyes, the girl losing was a dire situation. Deciding there was only one way he could help, he summoned the sign in system. Window. It was time to take a gamble. Idolatry daily sign in system. Day, 1698. Daily credit, 460. Sacrifice credit, 2. Sign in. Yes. Sign in successful, 462 credits consumed. Unlocked an A- grade item, Earrings of Absolute Fear. This might be goodbye forever, Tree. We had a fun few years. Huh? The girl was baffled as 2 little red leaf earrings hanging from black chains materialized in her hand. Ominous wisps of shadow shrouded their surface, and if one got really close, they could hear the screams of the dead. I love them. The girl seemed rejuvenated with life as she bounded to her feet. Best to die in style. Thanks for the gift, Tree. Ashlock grumbled as he watched over a year's worth of credits expended on some dumb cursed earrings. A sword would have been so much better. Or a skill that lets me assist her somehow. The girl carefully put the earrings on, and Ashlock had to admit they suited her, but they were nothing special. What a waste. I love them. The girl looked directly at his trunk, and the demonic tree felt his sap run cold. Her eyes appeared as 2 swirling masses of darkness, and he felt a wave of fear like no other silently caress his non-existent spine. Aura of fear detected. And then she turned away, and the pressure immediately disappeared as if it were just a dream. Holy shit. Ashlock let out a long sigh of relief. I will never doubt you again, system. Watching her departing back, Ashlock felt happy. He could finally get some sleep. Chapter 4, Knowledge is Power. Autumn arrived with good news. Tree, I won. The girl seemed in an ecstatic mood as she sat on the bench. I didn't lose a single round, and by the end, they were calling me Demonis Stella Crestfallen. How funny is that? I finally got her name. Ashlock was happy to finally learn the name of the annoying human that kept interrupting him. Referring to her as girl had been getting exhausting. Sadly, Stella kept calling him Tree, but that was fine. I even accidentally killed the scion of the Reborn family. Their grand elder was beyond furious, but what could I do? The poor boy froze up and didn't block my attack. Stella's victory speech was interrupted by a servant. Miss, would you like some tea? Sure. Bring some for my friend here as well. Stella said while patting Ashlock's bark. The servant left with a sly smile that Stella didn't seem to notice. She was too busy recounting her epic one-sided victories at the tournament. Ashlock found the servant's behavior odd, so he activated his Eye of the Tree God skill, and his world view shifted from the purple grass courtyard to an aerial view of the mountain. Seems the view range has expanded a little. Ashlock could now see more than just the mountaintop. The mountain's base was now in view, and he could even see the slope of a neighboring mountain. Now, where is that servant? Ashlock rotated the view to try and peer through the windows, and eventually, he found a room near the exotic garden courtyard with someone very similar looking to the servant through the window. It was hard to make out what was going on inside, but from his previous investigations, this room should be some kind of alchemist room. I believe the servant quarters and kitchen are on the other side of the pavilion. Ashlock felt making tea in an alchemist's room wasn't too far-fetched for a cultivation world but was still suspicious. Tree, I need to repay you. Stella was leaning against his bark and playing with the earrings in her fingers. I would give you these back, but what use are earrings to a tree? Is there something else you want? Food. Ashlock wanted to shout. If I got a few attack skills, I could hunt these darn birds that perch on my branches, but instead, I get language translation and some overpowered earrings. Tree, I know you can hear me. Do you understand me, though? Stella let out a sigh. Trees like knowledge, right? Stella sat cross-legged on the bench, turned to face Ashlock, and placed a hand on his bark. Purple flames materialized on her palm and softly spread out on Ashlock's bark. Bitch, are you burning me? So after everything he had done, she was scorching him? Wow, tree, to cultivate to the third realm in only a few years is very impressive. Of course, I am no tree expert, but I heard they usually cultivate very, very slowly. The invasive chi was a little probing but, overall, felt rather nice. Ashlock tried to push her chi away, but even inside his body, it was like trying to ward off a tsunami with a shovel. How does such a young girl have so much power? Are all humans this fast at cultivation? Stella had her eyes closed, and she let out a long breath. While I attempt to impart a cultivation technique on you, let me tell you the realms. The Chi realm, the first realm of cultivation, has 9 layers. People in the Chi realm can strengthen their bodies with ambient Chi and live long, healthy lives. Some also learn martial arts and can smash boulders while in the Chi realm. Ashlock tried to ignore the tickling sensation of Stella's Chi inspecting his body and listened intently to her talk. The cultivation systems for man and tree may differ, but learning the strength of his enemies was always ideal. So I am in the Chi realm, and I have 6 more layers until reaching the next realm, Ashlock grumbled. It's been 4 years, and I am still stuck in the 3rd layer. At this rate, I will be 1,000,000 years old before reaching the highest realm. Then, there is the Soul Forge realm after the Chi realm. This is where the weak fail and the path of a true cultivator begins. The Soul Forge realm has no layers and is achieved once the cultivator has formed a soul core. Stella then mumbled to herself if a tree could even understand such terms. A soul core is hard to explain in tree terms, but the important thing to know is if a person fails to form their soul core, they become a cripple and can never cultivate again. Ashlock could obviously understand what Stella was talking about to some degree. But what if I fail to form a soul core? Will I become a cripple too? Ashlock wondered. Unlike humans, trees can lose a branch and, over time, grow it back. Just like the branch destroyed by those blue energy cultivators. It has grown back better than ever already. Ashlock was now a little afraid of reaching the Soul Forge realm. Could Stella guide him somehow? Once a cultivator has formed the soul core, they can funnel the ambient chi in the air through the soul core to produce soul fire. The soul fire realm has 9 stages, and it's the one I am in. Stella smiled as she flexed the purple flames that coated her arms. This is why without a perfect soul core, a cultivator is a cripple. So make sure to take your time forming one, Mr. Tree. Ashlock wanted to ask why her soul fire was purple, but unfortunately, she didn't elaborate. Then there is the Star Core realm. Stella held back from crying at the mention of the realm that claimed her father's life. Sorry. Hard to talk about that one. Stella sighed before continuing. And above the Star Core is Nascent Soul and Monarch, but I'll speak of those another time. Those 2 realms are a long time away for the both of us. Ashlock was itching to discover the potential heights he could reach, but maybe knowing the horrors a Monarch cultivator could achieve would give him nightmares. He was just a little Chi realm sapling, after all. Miss, I have brought the tea. The servant stood at a respectful distance from Stella with 2 wooden cups of steaming tea in her hands. Okay, I am busy. Give the tree his tea and leave mine beside me, Stella said with her eyes still closed and purple flames cascading out of her hands. The servant's eye twitched, but she complied with Stella's words. She walked over to one of Ashlock's exposed roots and dumped the tea. Potent poison detected. Ashlock's brain buzzed as his body automatically acted to suppress the poison. It felt like someone had poured boiling oil on his foot, the pain was tremendous. Stella seemed to feel the chaotic flow of his chi and frowned. Calm down, tree. I'm almost done. Stella patted his bark and continued formulating a cultivation technique for him. The pain lasted for a minute but then thankfully subsided. What a lethal poison. That felt more like cyanide than any poison I know. Ashlock was no expert, but he theorized that despite his low realm, his enormous size and abundant chi helped suppress the poison. Taking a look at the concentrating Stella, Ashlock couldn't help but doubt she would survive drinking such a poison. Skill Basic Poison Resistance F learned. Wait. I can learn skills. Ashlock wanted to smack himself mentally. He had assumed he could only gain skills through the system's daily sign-in. The possibility of learning new skills hadn't even crossed his mind. Status. Demonic Spirit Sapling, age, 4. Chi Realm, 3rd stage. Skills. Eye of the Tree God. Language of the World B. Devour C. Basic Meditation F. Basic Poison Resistance F. Sure enough, I actually did learn a new skill. Ashlock was ecstatic, but the situation demanded his attention. It was safe to assume that the other cup of tea was also poisoned. Maybe the sign-in can give me something helpful. Idolatry Daily Sign-in System. Day, 1818. Daily Credit, 120. Sacrifice Credit, 0. Sign-in. Only 120 credits. How pitiful. Yes, sign-in. Sign-in successful, 120 credits consumed. Unlocked a C-grade skill, Chi Fruit Production. Right. That doesn't sound useful at all. Ashlock activated the skill, and a menu appeared in his mind. It let him select many properties for the fruit, such as size, taste, and growth rate. He could even give properties of skills to the fruit, such as basic poison resistance to grow a plant. I have to consume my chi? Ashlock frowned. Any chi he spent he had to regain through meditation, and since his meditation technique was F grade, it would take far too long to replenish the lost chi. Deciding to at least test it, Ashlock picked a fast-growing fruit that tasted like an apple and gave it a basic poison resistance buff. According to the menu, anyone who ate the fruit would gain poison resistance for a day. 5 months? Ashlock glared at the menu that had calculated the minimum growth time of the fruit while using 100% of the chi he accumulated from meditation. Removing the taste shaved off a month, and then removing the added skill brought it down to 3 days. So I can produce a tasteless fruit that contains a little chi in 3 days, but adding a skill or flavor greatly increases the production time. Ashlock may be a magical cultivating man-eating tree. But he was still a tree. To a human, 3 days is a long time. To him, it was nothing. Sadly, the situation was urgent, and Stella had picked the wrong teammate for a situation like this. Is there any way I can warn her? Ashlock mulled over the problem as he glared at the impatient servant whose eyes shifted between Stella, emitting a scary amount of soul fire, and the steaming cup of tea beside her on the bench. Phew. The purple soul fire dissipated, and Stella stretched her back. This will be more complicated than I thought. Unsurprisingly, a tree's biology is far too different from humans, so all the techniques I know won't work. But, I guess I can check out the library tomorrow for you. That was to be expected, but Ashlock was still disappointed. A better meditation technique would really help him out right now. Miss, your tea is getting cold. Stella gave the servant an odd look. Why are you still here? Is there anything else? The servant gulped and bowed. No, miss. Thank you, that will be all. Stella waved the servant off as she seemed lost in thought. The servant turned to leave, and Stella absent-mindedly brought the still warm tea to her lips. Ashlock cursed. There was a chance she would survive. It was even possible the tea contained rare ingredients that helped with cultivation but were harmful to trees. But Ashlock didn't like the suspicious behavior of the servant. If he had another method to convey his thoughts, he would definitely do it. But alas, with his limited arsenal of combat or communication abilities, this was the only option. Ashlock targeted the servant and cast Devour with as much chi as possible. The ground rumbled as black vines surged out of the purple grass. Stella was startled by a sudden scream and spilled some onto her dress. The tea sizzled as it dissolved some of the dress. Stella's soul fire erupted and the tea instantly evaporated, letting off a nasty stench. Stella dropped the cup and her cold eyes looked up at the servant tied up by many vines crushing her to death. Ashlock felt the message had been conveyed and the crisis averted, so he tried to cancel out the Devour skill. Skill cannot be cancelled. A few seconds passed, and the servant cried as blood erupted from her mouth like a fountain. +5 SC. Well, shit. Chapter 5, A Totally Friendly Tree. Ashlock felt absolutely nothing other than euphoria as he consumed the mortal servant. Chi rushed through the vines, and the thrill was intoxicating. Stella also watched the scene without a hint of interest. She was more bothered about her ruined dress. Tree, thank you, Stella said before leaving for the pavilion. It seems some rats from the other families have infiltrated my red vine peak. A sinister smile bloomed on her face. Seems there will be more food coming your way soon. Then with a flash, she vanished from her spot in a trail of purple flames. After a few minutes, the vines retreated into the ground, leaving some shredded clothes dyed in blood, littering the spot the servant had once stood. I know from stories that worlds with cultivators are brutal, but Stella's indifference still surprises me. Does she not see the servants as people due to them not being cultivators? Or perhaps people only care for themselves and their family in this world? Ashlock struggled a little with his human morals from the earth. He knew that murder was wrong, But it was hard to stop himself from killing when it brought him such euphoria and growth. Also, not getting punished and instead rewarded for killing makes the deed far easier. Since he had gained some chi, Ashlock decided to use some for advancing his cultivation and the rest to create some fruit. Like water, chi was an odd thing. His body could only take in so much at once. Unfortunately, the excess chi his body couldn't store dissipated into the atmosphere unless he invested it into something, such as fruit. Bring up the menu for chi fruit production. Ashlock selected to create 10 fruit. All of them were tasteless, but they stored some chi, and 3 had the basic poison resistance buff. Feeling content, Ashlock hit the create button and felt the chaotic chi inside him rush toward his branches. In amazement, Ashlock then watched the stems of the fruit grow. In real time. Now what? Ashlock had already signed in for the day, and Stella had gone off somewhere. Guess ill sleep. Ashlock awoke to darkness and screams. Moonlight shrouded the courtyard, and Ashlock could see torchlight through the pavilion's windows. Wait. Is this the first time I've seen the night? Ashlock had always woken up when Stella or the Blue Energy Man came to bring him food, which was during the day. He also naturally woke up during the daytime. Ashlock tried to activate his meditation skill, but nothing happened. Huh. I guess there is no sunlight, and I am a plant. Never really occurred to me that I can't cultivate during the night. Ashlock now realized why his meditation technique wasn't just bad, it was downright shit. If I can get a moonlight cultivation technique, I should double my cultivation speed. Anyway, back to the screams. Ashlock struggled to really care. The cold night air and lack of sunlight made him feel sluggish and uncaring. Like waking up on a Sunday morning to bad news and just wanting to crawl back under the sheets and sleep. Anything interesting going on? Ashlock spread his spiritual sight, but his limit was still the courtyard unless he activated his skill. Maybe someone died. So sleepy. Ashlock was about to succumb to his slothfulness when a man stumbled into the courtyard clutching his side. Ashlock's spirit sight allowed him to see perfectly, even in the dark, so he noticed the area the man was clutching was dyed red. Ooh. Another victim. Stella won't mind, right? Ashlock was itching to use his devour skill, but he decided to wait and see. Like a good patient tree. The man appeared to be immortal as he lacked any type of presence, had a rather ordinary appearance, and wore servant clothes. Ashlock had noticed that the black robes and dresses with a sewn-on red lotus that Stella wore differed from the plain gray robes the servant wore. Come to think of it. This is the Red Vine Peak, so why does Stella have a red lotus sewn onto her robe? She mentioned a lot of other families nearby and a tournament, so I assume we are inside a sect of some kind. Maybe the Red Lotus sect. Ashlock mentally added that to his growing list of questions to investigate. Being a tree was an odd experience in a cultivation world. If he made enemies with powerful people, he couldn't run. But on the other hand, he is a tree, so people have no reason to go out of their way to trouble him. Other young masters? Sure. A random tree in a courtyard? Why? He was a very harmless and friendly tree. Maybe I should take a fight if threatened stance. At least until I'm a godlike tree that cannot be defeated. Deciding that was reasonable, Ashlock assumed an observing role as any friendly tree should strive for, and watched the drama unfold. The screams continued, so Ashlock activated his Eye of the Tree God skill and observed the Red Vine Peak from above. Oh. Seems Stella has found the rats. Stella was battling with 2 servants in the nearby sandy training area courtyard. As she battled with the 2 servants, purple flames flickered across Stella's skin. Ashlock zoomed in on their faces and mentally frowned. I have never seen these 2 before. Since when did they work here? The servants wore the usual robes, but their faces were far too chiseled and well kept to belong to mere servants. Like in all cultivator novels, absorbing ambient chi naturally removes imperfections like acne or rough skin. Don't look at her. She has a demonic eye technique. The taller of the 2 servants shouted as he covered his eyes with one arm and summoned a blade of red flames in the other. The second servant nodded and covered his eyes while black flames flared to life on his fist. Ashlock could tell from here that the flames from these servants were far brighter than Stella's, especially the one with red flames. That sort of fire practically looked solid. Unfortunately for Stella, the 2 cultivator servants weren't alone. Servants in gray robes lined the training courtyard holding various weapons. One even had a very fancy-looking sword. Why? Stella screamed at the people surrounding her. Who sent you? I will pay triple what they did. Stella. Don't bother wasting your breath on them. They will never tell you. Ashlock sighed. The villains in movies only made those stupid speeches in movies. You think you can murder the scion of House Reborn and live? The flame sword cultivator sneered and stepped forward. The Grand Elder demands your head on a platter. I stand corrected, Ashlock grumbled. This is a cultivator world, after all. Ashlock once again felt helpless and lacked options to assist. Maybe that's for the best, though. Anyone who can kill Stella could defeat me with a finger flick. Ashlock hated to admit it, but he was just a third-realm sapling with no defensive capabilities and a single attack skill that could be easily dodged or destroyed. The vines that erupted from the ground had a thin layer of chi strengthening them, but only at his level, the third layer of the chi realm. To a mortal servant, that was a death sentence. But to Fire Sword Guy, he would laugh at Ashlock's pathetic attempts to snare a demigod such as himself and chop Ashlock down with a single cut of his blade. God being weak is so lame. Ashlock mumbled as he watched the two cultivators slowly close in on Stella. The young girl rapidly looked around, and everyone she glanced at froze in fear. I wonder if Stella knows the power those earrings have. Fire Sword Guy launched forward and slashed at Stella, but she barely dodged and nimbly stepped to the side, summoning the black dagger from somewhere. She rammed it toward the man's side, but a flare of red flames made her wince back. Stella didn't have a moment of rest as the black fist guy came right for her head. Stella's low stature helped her duck as the fist whistled through the air, making her blonde hair wave in the wind. Ashlock found the cultivator's movements a little clumsy, but considering they were using an arm to block their eyes, it made sense. Why don't they just close their eyes? Are they stupid? Stella retaliated against the black fist guy by tripping him up with a well-placed foot. But before she could move in for the kill on his exposed neck, the servant with a fancy sword blocked her blade, which he instantly regretted as the purple flame-covered dagger sliced straight through the metal sword and cut the servant's leg off in one smooth motion. Keeping up the tempo, Stella twirled around and finished the servant off by decapitating his head. Honestly, keeping up with the fight was exhausting. Ashlock debated going to sleep and learning the results tomorrow when lovely warm sunlight and chi would be trickling in from his meditation skill. Focusing back on the central courtyard, it seemed the servant was dying. He was lying on the floor panting, clutching his wound, and trying to stop the bleeding. Ashlock recognized the servant. He often tended to the kitchen and was rarely seen outside. All things returned to the earth as nutrients. Ashlock stopped that trail of thought in surprise. He felt no pity for the dying man, only the desire for the inevitable nutrients. Well, I might as well put him out of his misery. If Ashlock used some twisted logic. When he was human back on Earth, he had no issue eating beef or chicken because that was considered food. Now he was a demonic sapling. Everything was food. Even humans. It was. Either he devoured and became strong enough to protect himself, or regretted his indecisiveness when that fire guy's blade cut him in half. Sorry, dude. You picked the wrong place to die. Ashlock mumbled a silent prayer for the guy and activated the devour skill. Unfortunately, the poor guy didn't seem to have the strength to resist as the spiked vines mummified him. +5 SC. Ashlock hummed as the rush of chi flooded his system. But then, a second rush caught him off guard. Chi surged through his roots and chaotically rushed around his trunk like a hurricane. Status: Demonic Spirit Sapling, Age, 4. Chi Realm, 4th Stage. Skills. Finally, it had taken Ashlock over a year to reach the next stage. The rush made Ashlock hungry for more, so he searched the courtyard for any more stray servants to devour. Stella will understand. There was a decent chance that all the servants had turned against their master or weren't subservient in the first place. Right on cue, another 3 servants stumbled through the connecting area between the training courtyard and the central courtyard. Ashlock didn't even hesitate and cast Devour. There was so much chaotic chi running through his body that the vines shot out of the ground with such impressive speed that they straight up impaled the 3 servants and dragged their corpses to the ground. +5 SC. +5 SC. +5 SC. One after another, the corpses were devoured. In a haze of madness, Ashlock felt he might throw up chi at this rate. With the only outlet being chi fruit production, he summoned the menu and picked random options before pressing confirm. Phew. Ashlock let out a deep breath as the system initiated the skill and forcefully funneled the chaotic chi away from his body and into the fruit production. This skill is more useful than I thought. Although it wasn't a combat skill, it was a great way to prevent himself from dying due to gluttony. Ashlock saw a few tiny blood-red berries dangle from his branches in 3 clusters and realized there was an artistic beauty in recycling the dead into a new life that would provide for other living things. As a tree, he was no longer an endless consumer but now a provider to the world, a governor of the natural cycle of life and death. Tree. Ashlock was broken from his thoughts as he saw Stella limp toward him. Purple flames flickered across her shoulders like weak candlelight as she collapsed just a short distance from his root. Her breathing was ragged and slow, and it appeared she had sustained some injuries. Before Ashlock could do anything, a heavily injured fire sword guy emerged from behind the door and slowly stepped toward Stella using a steel sword as a makeshift cane. Flickering red flames illuminated his face as the man loomed over the dying girl. "Fucking bitch." The man grimaced as some blood dripped from his teeth. His eyes were sealed shut, and he tried to locate the girl by poking the ground with the sword. Ashlock waited patiently for the perfect moment to strike. The man inched ever closer. Stella was lying on her back, struggling to keep her eyes open as the man's sword made contact with her leg. "There you are." The man grinned as he brought the sword up over his head in a two-handed grip. The man stopped mid-sentence as a chi-empowered vine surged out of the ground behind him and impaled his back. The man looked down at the hole in his chest with a lost look. The sword tumbled to the ground as the man's arm lost strength. "Who?" The cultivator looked around, and his eyes landed on the black tree with scarlet leaves letting off a faint whiff of chi. "A tree." With a final gasp for air, the man fell forward onto Stella, causing the girl to groan in pain. Plus 100. SC. Chapter 6, Snacks Before Winter. Ashlock stirred from his short sleep as the sun crested the horizon. Since his view range was limited, even with his eye of the tree god skill, Ashlock saw the world as if he were in a snow globe. He had a perfect sphere of vision in all directions for a few miles, meaning he couldn't see the sun, but its pleasant warmth pierced the clouds and illuminated the central courtyard. Shredded clothes dyed in dried blood littered the courtyard alongside bits of metal from half-destroyed weapons. Ashlock gazed upon the source of all this mess, a sleeping blonde-haired girl a few feet away. Her back rose and fell in a steady rhythm, and her breath swayed the purple grass dripping in her drool that tickled her nose. Stella was alive. Ashlock was no doctor, but from a glance, it would be impossible to survive the night with such injuries for a human back on Earth. It's moments like these that truly remind me I'm in a new world. Magic is just the manifestation of the world. I've seen a sword covered in flames back on Earth. But a person smashing a boulder with their bare hands or teleporting halfway across the courtyard in a single step? Now that was truly magical. And seeing Stella survive such a fight with her body barely intact was something I could never see back on Earth. Feeling bored, Ashlock summoned the daily sign-in. Idolatry daily sign-in system. Day, 1819. Daily credit, 1. Sacrifice credit, 120. Sign-in. Yes. Ashlock decided this would be his last sign-in before a long sleep. Winter was coming, and retaining consciousness during the dark winter felt worse than his withdrawals from energy drinks. Sign-in successful, 121 credits consumed. Unlocked a C-grade skill, Hibernate. Hibernate. Ashlock concentrated on the skill, and its meaning materialized in his mind. The feeling was similar to déjà vu. Another type of meditation. The skill had 2 functions. First, he would set a timer and enter deep sleep when activated. Nothing except exceptional circumstances would awaken him until the timer was complete. The second feature was that the longer he was asleep, the faster his cultivation became. The buff was small, but over a long period, it would add up. Ashlock practically cried tears of joy. Finally, he had a way of sleeping through all the girl's ramblings and not being awoken every time she entered the courtyard. This skill obviously had some disadvantages, but it was overall an excellent addition to his arsenal. A few hours passed as the sun climbed the sky, and sometime around midday, Stella's eyes opened, and she let out a long groan. Purple fire sprung to life, and Stella rolled over and looked at the sky with squinted eyes. "I lived," she muttered as she held up a hand to shield her eyes from the sun. A single tear ran down her cheek as she lay there for a while. It was hard to remember she was just a young girl, seemingly without any family, living alone on a mountain peak when she went around slaughtering so many people. Half an hour passed, and the rumbling of Stella's stomach forced her to get up. Only now did she look at Ashlock, and a smile bloomed on her face seeing the tree was still there. She looked closer at the scarlet leaves drifting in the autumn breeze and noticed the variety of fruits dangling from the branches. "Can I eat some?" Stella asked as she tried to stand on her tiptoes to reach the low-hanging fruit. Although Ashlock was relatively short for a tree, Stella was both short and young, so she struggled to reach up. Ashlock was sure she had a trick up her sleeve, but she looked haggard, and her purple flames flickered. Looking back at his chi fruit production menu, there was an option to discharge a grown fruit. Clicking it, a tiny bit of chi was used to break the stem, causing a bundle of red berries to fall into Stella's waiting hand. "Thank you, tree." Stella gave a thumbs up, and without debating if they were poisonous, she swallowed them in a single gulp, which she instantly regretted. Bleh. Tree, these taste like grass and sap. The girl surprisingly ate them all, but she had a disgusted face which transitioned into one of surprise as chi rushed through her body. It was weak, but with the entire bundle of berries combined, it was enough to refill her depleted chi reserves a little. Taste better than chi restoration weeds, at least. Stella stood under the tree with her hands cupped. "Can I have some more?" A few moments passed and nothing fell. Stella pouted. "They taste good. Better than any other cultivation supplements." Only then did a single purple with black spots fruit plop into her hand. This time, she eyed the fruit more cautiously and took a hesitant bite. Ugh, so bitter. Stella almost choked on the piece of fruit. "I mean, I like bitter things." Stealing her resolve, she swallowed the entire thing and gagged. Ashlock sighed as he watched the dumb girl attempt to please a tree. He intended to withhold the fruit to prove he could understand her, not to make her torture herself by eating his tasteless fruit in a vain attempt to curry favor with him. The rest of the afternoon was spent by Stella pleading for berries and fruit and Ashlock providing them. Ashlock was glad to get rid of them as it freed up space to grow some nice fruit. However, a bit of his pride was hurt watching the girl almost died while trying to eat his fruit. "Feels like when Mom used to refuse to eat my cooking." The experience left a sour taste in his mouth, so he brought up the menu and invested everything into a single fruit in a momentary lapse in judgment. Ashlock felt chi get sucked from his body down his thickest branch, and a watermelon-sized fruit with a golden color began its development. Time till completion, 6 months. A bit of a waste, but oh well. Ashlock returned his attention to Stella, who looked a lot better. The abundant chi helped restore her weary body to its peak condition. "Tree, I know you can understand me now," Stella proclaimed with a bit of berry juice smeared on her face. "Don't sleep just yet. Help me dispose of the evidence." Before Ashlock could ask what she meant, not that he could ask anyway, the girl had wandered off. "Dispose of the evidence." Ashlock's eyes drifted to the shredded remains of a gray servant robe. Ah. An hour later, there was a pile of servants in the courtyard. Stella had found a few servants still alive hiding throughout the pavilion, but she slaughtered them all. Ashlock didn't know the customs or rules here, but it seemed even the servants expected their own demise. I guess even if they weren't accomplices to the intruders working for House Reborn, they still didn't come to their master's aid and instead cowered away under tables. "Right," Stella said while she brushed her hands off on her tattered robe. "I know most trees sleep through the winter, and you also seem to sleep a lot." Stella tapped her nose. "When you are asleep, the flow of your chi is very stable compared to when you are awake." "I can tell." The girl seemed very proud of herself, and Ashlock was relieved he didn't have to scream into the void in frustration. Alas, it seemed the girl hadn't figured out that he would prefer to sleep all year round uninterrupted. But it was the small victories that mattered here. Stella took a step back so Ashlock could get to work. Devour activated, and vines crawled over the human pyramid. A stream of alerts shot past his mind informing him of acquired sacrifice credits. In total, there were over 100 such notifications. Hours passed, and plus 736 SC was the final total as the vines retreated into the ground. Unfortunately, Ashlock didn't have time to enjoy the increased credits as the surge of chi inside his body was unfathomable. Ashlock mashed the create button as fast as he could on the watermelon-sized golden fruits. At some point, Stella had walked off to get changed into less ravaged clothes while Ashlock battled for his life to not explode from the rampaging chi. Eventually, it was done after fighting all night. The sun of a new day appeared. Not only was he dripped out with enough golden fruit to feed an entire family, but he had also advanced 2 realms. Demonic Spirit Sapling, age 4. Chi Realm, 6th stage. Skills: Eye of the Tree God. Language of the World B. Chi Fruit Production C. Devour C. Hibernate C. Basic Meditation F. Basic Poison Resistance F. Ashlock also checked the daily sign-in. Idolatry daily sign-in system. Day 1819. Daily credit 1. Sacrifice credit 856. Sign in. No, Ashlock wanted to get another A- grade draw. However, he would need 1,000 points combined, so he decided to save them. Looking around the courtyard, Stella was nowhere to be found, but Ashlock was beyond caring. He was mentally exhausted, and sleep was calling his name. Activating his new skill Hibernate, he input 6 months and felt a timer appear in his head, counting the 180 days until his awakening. Chapter 7, Tree Skip. Ashlock was in a tunnel, an endless tunnel where he could do nothing. No thoughts crossed his mind. No dreams of a better tomorrow. Nothing. Just steady progress to an eventual end. An end he knew was coming due to the timer ticking down. It was slow, so agonizingly slow. Hibernation, 32 days. Ashlock was trapped within his mind. The cursed skill he had employed kept his mind on the straight and narrow. Before, when he slept, time passed in the blink of an eye. There were no dreams, no turbulence. Just one moment, he would close his eyes and the next, awaken in a new season, a new situation. A new time. Hibernation, 31 days. But with the Hibernate skill, he was forced to experience the flow of time. Like some kind of mortal creature. How long had he been here? Going down this tunnel in his mind. The gray walls of nothingness kept him confined from everything else. He wanted to think, dream, plot, and plan. Anything to end this mind-numbing state of being. Hibernation, 30 days. Easy decisions create hard times. A phrase that resounded in Ashlock's head. The skill had seemed so innocent, so easy. Just flip a switch and watch the world fly by. No more disturbances and even a slight boost to his chi accumulation. Hibernation, 29 days. If Ashlock had to describe his current situation to a mortal mind, imagine a concrete, lifeless tunnel where you are paralyzed and rolling down the tunnel while strapped to a stretcher. Only an ominous timer floating in front of your eyes notifies you of your eventual freedom from this confinement. The worst of it? Ashlock did this to himself. Hibernation, 28 days. A small part of Ashlock appreciated this experience. It forcefully brought back a bit of his humanity that had been slipping away. 6 months to him was nothing as a tree, just another past winter. But to a human? Someone like Stella? 6 months could be life-changing. For all Ashlock knew, he may escape this nightmare and awaken in an empty courtyard ravaged by nature. What if he went to sleep and no cultivators ever entered the courtyard? Would he awaken eons later to witness the eventual death of the planet as the sun expanded at the end of its long life and swallowed the planet whole? Hibernation, 27 days. He screamed. Anything to break the silence. Hibernation, 26 days. What was the rush? Ever since arriving in this world, Ashlock had chosen sleep over being awake. Was he hiding from his problems? Just because the system gave him rewards for passing the time and killing, did that justify him rushing into the future and letting the present pass him by? Hibernation, 25 days. Immortality is a funny thing. If given all the time in the world, the need to accomplish things suddenly vanishes since there's always tomorrow. Or next year. And unlike an ordinary immortal, who needs to fill their time with hobbies to avoid insanity, Ashlock could just blink the time away. Ashlock knew he was in a world of cultivators where the pursuit of overwhelming power and immortality was possible. What would happen if he could speak to another immortal? Would they have some advice to steer him on the right path? Maybe. Maybe not. Ashlock was just a young sapling confined to a single courtyard atop a mountain peak. He was young and ignorant of the world. But that doesn't mean that planning for the future lacks merit. The endless pursuit of strength, new abilities, and land was fine, but what did he truly value? Perhaps a question for another time. Hibernation, 24 days. Ashlock's mind came to a sudden halt with such force that the mental tunnel that confined his mind from distractions shattered in a shower of glass. His worldview lurched forward as if the stretcher he was attached to was connected to a bungee cord, and everything hit him at once. Hibernation terminated. Extreme threat detected. The air vibrated as something beyond this mortal realm arrived. Ashlock's mind spun as he tried to identify the source and readapt to his surroundings. The purple grass central courtyard was empty, summer was in full swing, and Ashlock could feel the warmth on his leaves and the refreshing breeze on his shaded bark. But a suffocating presence blanketed the area like a godlike entity glaring from above. Eye of the tree god activated and Ashlock's view shifted. His sixth layer in the Chi realm became apparent as the peak of the neighboring mountain was in full view. Atop was a pavilion similar to his, but its courtyards were filled with harrowing leafless trees that looked like withered black fingers reaching for the skies. Monstrous birds with raven feathers and beady red eyes perched upon the tree branches, and a dense mist shrouded the entire peak as people moved about in the shadows of the fog. But the source of the alarm didn't come from there. No, it came from the base of Red Vine Peak. Switching his view, Ashlock witnessed a man climbing 1,000 steps, taking 100 steps at a time. White fire so dense it was blinding shrouded the man as the air seemed to gravitate towards him as he gracefully glided up the mountainside as if he were ice skating. As the man approached the pavilion's door, Ashlock rotated his view and saw Stella. She had been cultivating in the middle of a runic formation in one of the courtyards. Ashlock was no expert, but he suspected the formation helped to condense the ambient chi, making cultivation faster. Her eyes snapped open and her body shuddered right as the man placed his hand on the door to knock. Stella practically stumbled off the runic formation and managed to stop herself from tumbling to the ground as she broke into a sprint. Purple flames sprung to life and Ashlock caught a glimpse of her movement technique. Purple flames exploded at the base of her feet, rocketing her forward in a controlled manner, letting her close the distance in a split second. A single knock resounded through the courtyard as Stella halted in a cloud of dust. She then quickly tidied herself up before opening the door. Stella crestfallen greets the Grand Elder. Stella's hair whipped as she threw herself into a 90-degree bow. At ease, young one. The man looked barely over 25, but his voice and poise suggested a long life of politics and family drama. I have come on behalf of the disciplinary committee. The man walked past Stella and slowly looked around as if bored. I hope you don't mind the surprise inspection. Stella gulped and didn't dare raise her head. Of course not, Grand Elder. You are welcome to visit my humble abode anytime. The Grand Elder practically floated as he walked down the pavilion corridor toward the outer courtyards. The wooden walls creaked and groaned as he passed, unlocked window shutters swung inside and plant pots wobbled on their stands. Ashlock tracked the man's movements with his skill through the windows, but he felt a sense of danger as the man wrapped in subtle white flames paused and glanced directly at him. Some would believe it was pure luck, or perhaps the man was gazing at the passing clouds littering the sky. But the man's cold eyes stared into Ashlock's with such precision and purpose it was creepy. Tell me, scion of House Crestfallen. Where are your servants? The man kept walking toward the exotic garden as he spoke in a tranquil voice as if the affairs of the mortal world were of no concern to him. My servants. They betrayed me, Stella said without masking anything. I slaughtered them all. I see. The man's voice lacked emotion as the pair reached the garden, and the Grand Elder casually plucked a rose and twirled it between two fingers. The plants seemed to naturally bend their stalks as if an invisible weight was pressing down on them as the Grand Elder passed. A fitting response. I would do the same. If not worse. The Grand Elder chuckled quietly as he continued his peaceful walk. His eyes lingered on the occasional splat of dried blood that Stella had missed when cleaning up. The pavilion was massive, and over 300 people could live comfortably there at any given time. To expect a single teenage girl to clean every nook and cranny was unrealistic. The Grand Elder reached the kitchen wing and opened the door with a flick. White flames lashed out like a whip and the hefty door creaked open. A plume of dust and stale air followed, causing the Grand Elder to frown. Child, you are still growing. Food is important. Why is the kitchen so unused? Responding to Grand Elder. No need for such pleasantries. Just call me Elder. Stella winced back. Okay, Elder. I don't know how to cook. So, how do you eat? Stella paused for a while. A gust of wind passed the two, causing their robes to flutter. Only the chirps of birds and soft breeze filled the awkward silence. It's complicated. Child, you seem confused about my purpose here. The Grand Elder said in a friendly but flat tone. Your father was a good friend of mine. The snakes of House Reborn demand this peak be turned over to them as compensation for the death of their scion. I am simply here to confirm you are not a threat or conducting anything against the sect rules. The relief was evident on Stella's face as she let out a long sigh. I grow food and live off that. Also, my cultivation is rather high, so my need for sustenance is rather low. You are indeed a very impressive child. The Patriarch hopes you will become a Grand Elder in the future. The Grand Elder looked around the exotic garden with a deepening frown. Don't tell me you live off this stuff. He plucked a small berry and gave it a sniff. Hardly a whiff of chi in the size of my thumb. Garbage. Then he said with a thin smile, Stella, you are a terrible gardener. Shall we go see the true source of your food? The Grand Elder didn't even wait for her response and glided toward the central courtyard. Shit. Ashlock cancelled out his Eye of the Tree God skill and his view returned to the central courtyard's purple grass. What can I do? Should I sign in? The Grand Elder claimed to be friendly, but what if he didn't approve of a man eating tree living near his dead friend's daughter? Best to be safe. Idolatry Daily Sign-in System. Day, 1975. Daily Credit, 157. Sacrifice Credit, 856. Sign in. Yes. Sign in successful, 1013 credits consumed. Unlocked an A- grade skill, Deep Roots. Ashlock mentally slammed his mind against his bark in frustration. System, what the fuck am I supposed to do with this? I have a demigod walking toward me, and you give me this? Then, focusing on the skill, the information appeared in his mind. By spending chi, my roots become empowered and can tunnel through rock without issue. I can also hollow out my roots to create tunnels. Ashlock had to admit there were some applications for this skill, especially considering he was atop the peak of a mountain, so the only way was down. And who knows what lies in the deep caverns of the mountains? There had to be a reason the sect was founded on this land. Maybe a secret realm or monsters for me to kill? Sadly, the skill seemed rather useless in the current situation. Ashlock watched helplessly as the Grand Elder strolled across the courtyard. The purple grass flattened in a perfect circle around him as if the man had his own gravity, and the white flames shrouding his form made him so bright that he was blinding to look at in Ashlock's spirit sight. The man approached and eyed the golden fruit blooming from Ashlock's branches. Interesting. I have never seen this type of fruit before. The Grand Elder reached up and easily plucked a fruit. He rotated it in his hand, observing every nook and crevice in the golden fruit. Then he threw it up and down a few times, testing its weight. Dense and full of chi. Although weaker than a cultivation pill, it's definitely a miracle fruit. Ashlock held his breath as the Grand Elder stepped closer and laid a hand on his bark. A pulse of power, like a sonar wave, rippled through Ashlock's body. The Grand Elder frowned. Is this a demonic tree spirit? Chapter 8, Grand Elder's Declaration. Is this a demonic tree spirit? Ashlock held his breath. If resisting Stella's chi was like warding off a tsunami with a shovel, then the Grand Elder's chi was like throwing a pebble at a star. His death was inevitable if the Grand Elder deemed it so. Ashlock attempted to appear as harmless as possible. I am a harmless, humble tree mister. Please don't kill me. Obviously, the man couldn't hear his pitiful plea, but it was worth a try. I believe so, Elder. Stella curtly replied as she rocked on her heels. Isn't it amazing? The Grand Elder sagely nodded his head as he inspected the demonic tree. Indeed, for such a young demonic tree to cultivate to the 6th layer of the chi realm. That's almost as fast as you, Stella, and it shouldn't even have a cultivation technique. The Grand Elder opened his eyes and removed his hand from Ashlock's trunk with a smile tugging at his lips. Oh, Elder, talking of cultivation techniques. Stella scratched the back of her neck as if embarrassed to admit something. I tried looking in the sect library and couldn't find any cultivation technique that seemed applicable to a tree. Do we have any? The Grand Elder shook his head. Sadly, we do not. Tree spirits are barely sentient and, therefore, can't comprehend a cultivation technique. After thousands of years, some form soul cores and gain higher intelligence, but their biology is so far from us it's hard to convince one to try and cultivate like us. The Grand Elder picked up the golden fruit he had placed on the bench and twirled it in his hand. This tree is a great find. But I fear if the Ravenborns learn of its existence, they will storm in here unannounced and make a scene. These fruits alone would save them thousands of spirit stones a year in cultivation pills for their juniors. Stella walked up and patted Ashlock, but Grand Elder, this tree is very intelligent. Unless I praised it or asked nicely, it wouldn't give me fruit. I think it might be a narcissist like the Patriarch. Hush, child, do not speak ill of the Patriarch. The Grand Elder lightly smacked Stella on the head, causing her to whimper. But you claim this tree has some level of intelligence. The man stroked his chin and looked at the leaves rustling in the summer breeze with a distant look. No matter what the Grand Elder said, Ashlock planned to play dumb. Cultivator worlds were ruthless and backstabbing was common. Keeping your true strength and trump cards close to your chest was the first rule of surviving in such a dog-eat-dog world. The Grand Elder positioned his hand below a fruit. Drop. A few seconds passed by with nothing happening. Is this really how you discovered the tree spirit was sentient? Stella scratched her cheek. That is correct, Elder. Perhaps ask the tree nicely? The Grand Elder grumbled, Please, O mighty tree spirit, bestow upon me a divine fruit. A breeze went by, and the happy chirping of the birds accompanied the awkward silence. Maybe it's asleep. The Grand Elder resolutely declared, withdrew his hand, and assumed a whimsical stance. Stella tactically decided to remain silent for the Grand Elder's dignity and to avoid drawing any more attention to the tree. She knew in her heart that the tree spirit was there. Not only did it drop her fruits, it even gifted her earrings, and the most beautiful piece of wood Stella had ever seen, which she had turned into daggers, both of which were carefully hidden away. She was not strong enough yet to protect such rare treasures. All right, child, I will be on my way to report back to the disciplinary committee. The man winked as he left. I saw nothing of interest. Thank you, Elder, for your infinite kindness. Stella bowed, and the man waved her off. No need to thank me. Oh, before I go, one last thing. As the mistress and sole heir of Red Vine Peak, you are hereby promoted to Grand Elder. Stella's mouth gaped open. But Elder. I am only 13 and in the second layer of the Soul Fire realm. How can I possibly bear the responsibilities of a Grand Elder? The Grand Elder shrugged. Order of the Patriarch. You have 5 years before you must pass the Grand Elder test. If you fail, Red Vine Peak will be handed over to House Ravenborn. That is the agreement the elders reached this morning. Stella was stumped, and the Grand Elder cared little for her inner turmoil as he turned his back to her and started channeling chi, causing the surrounding air to vibrate and groan as he began to tear reality apart with his 2 hands. Finally, the white flames that shrouded his body created a wormhole, a crack in existence, and without a hint of hesitation, the Grand Elder stepped through, and with a pop, he was gone. Stella collapsed to her knees and just stared at the spot the Grand Elder once stood with vacant eyes, her arms hung by her sides and her shoulders slumped. Then after a while, she picked herself up and, with a huff, collapsed onto the bench under Ashlock's shade. Tree. It's impossible, Red Vine Peak will be taken from me. A tear threatened to spill from her eye, but she brushed it off with the sleeve of her black robe. I tried so darn hard. Tree, everyone in my family was slaughtered in the last beast tide, and only me and my father remained. If my grandparents and sister hadn't sacrificed themselves for the Patriarch, that bastard would be dead. Stella held back a sniffle as her arms dangled off the side of the bench. And what does my family get for their sacrifice? The right to fight for our position among the other families. I could tell my father was suffering. He was never the most talented at cultivation, and his foundation was already weak. So I begged him not to push for the Star Core realm. Stella never finished the sentence and instead opted to watch Ashlock's red leaves gently sway in the wind. The weather was perfect, and the chorus of summer helped lighten Stella's mood. Those bastards want to kill me. What kind of 13-year-old is expected to strive for the Star Core realm? My father was over 100 when he attempted to ascend and form his inner Star Core, and he died trying. Her hands balled into fists at her side. Tree, you may not know of the horrors out there in the wilderness, but the spirit beasts outnumber us cultivators 1,000 to 1. So when there is a beast tide, if the sect doesn't have a monarch realm cultivator, the only option is abandoning the sect and migrating to new lands. If I can't become a Grand Elder by age 18, I will be cast out of the sect and be left to die out there. Ashlock tactically sniped Stella's head by dropping fruit. Ow! Stella rubbed her head and scowled at the tree. What was that for? She picked up the golden apple and sensed the thick chi, and her stomach rumbled from the delicious scent. Taking a bite, her eyes went wide, and she spoke with her mouth full, hum. So good. Thank you. She ignored the tears streaming down her face and relished the delicious fruit. That was the fruit Ashlock had poured a lot of chi into 6 months ago. Sigh. This is quite the conundrum. Ashlock had felt firsthand the difference between Stella's chi and the Grand Elder's. If he guessed correctly, the Grand Elder was in the elusive Star Core realm, one major realm above Stella. I can't imagine Stella could obtain that amount of power in just 5 short years. Hell, I went from the 1st to the 6th layer of the Chi realm in that time. Stella would need to obtain 7 layers in a higher realm in the same time frame. Tree, thank you for the snack. I feel much better now. Stella patted his bark with red eyes and tear-stained cheeks. It may be impossible, but miracles can always come to those who try. Stella then marched directly toward the training courtyard and spent the next few hours smashing the ever-living shit out of the training dummies. Finally, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Stella collapsed in exhaustion. Seeing Stella work so hard inspired the slothful tree to finally do something useful. I can sleep during the winter, but while summer persists, I best use my time. No more pointless sleeping. Maybe. The horrors of the hibernate skill made him almost terrified of closing his eyes. What if he got trapped in that state of mind again? Ashlock decided to run away from sleep by distracting himself, and his first call to action was to utilize his new skill Deep Roots first. Chi that he had collected throughout the day surged toward his roots like a cascading waterfall, and he felt them wiggle with power. Next, his roots began to expand like little fingers, seeping into every nook or crack in the rock. Then as the roots weaseled their way in, the chi caused the root to rapidly expand, causing the rock to fracture and crack more, allowing the roots to delve even deeper. It was a horrifically slow, chi-intensive, and mind-numbing process. Luckily his roots helped hold the rock together. So there was little chance of the mountain collapsing. Soon the entire mountain will be one big tree. Chapter 9, Thunderstruck. Despite Ashlock's bold claims, his biology didn't agree with his newfound aversion to sleep. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a wave of fatigue assaulted his mind, and before he knew it, the sun had risen once again, and it was the start of a new day. I wish I had this power when I was a human, Ashlock grumbled as he reminisced about the many nights he spent gazing at the ceiling with the clock reading 5 a.m. and his stomach grumbling. Being a tree isn't so bad after all. Ashlock didn't need to worry about work or his next meal. Heck, he didn't even need to pay taxes anymore. He was both free from Earth's rigorous constraints yet strangely less free than ever before. He was trapped in a body of wood and sap, rooted in place for all eternity. Ashlock looked around and took in the view, likely the only sight he would see for the rest of his ageless life. Perhaps it was the time skipping or just his natural biology, but even after living here for 5 years, Ashlock felt like this was his home, where he belonged more than anywhere else. Ashlock was secure, his roots were deep, and his leaves were exposed to the heavens above. A breeze blew by and Ashlock watched as the lush purple grass danced in the wind. Nature was somehow even more breathtakingly beautiful when he had become nature. As a spiritual tree with command over chi, he could see in all directions and sense everything. Unlike a human mind that was limited to his eyes and ears, Ashlock could take everything in at once. The silky feathers of every bird perched on his branches, the vibrant colors of every blooming flower throughout the courtyard, even Stella's flowing hair and steady breathing as she cultivated were within Ashlock's senses. The world was teeming with life, and he was part of that cycle. As his thoughts drifted from one mundane thing to another, the sun sailed across the sky, and as the horizon glowed a mellow orange, Ashlock fell asleep. The following day saw the rapid accumulation of cumulonimbus clouds that darkened the sky and cast a dreary mood on Red Vine Peak's courtyard. "Seems a big storm is coming, tree," Stella commented as she munched on one of Ashlock's golden fruit with a smile and swung her legs off the side of the makeshift bench. Unfortunately, there weren't many fruits left, and Ashlock sadly didn't have the chi to make more. Currently, he was devoting all of his chi to furthering his cultivation realm. Demonic Spirit Sapling, age 5. Chi Realm, 6th stage. Skills. Ashlock glared at his summary. When would he be considered a tree rather than a sapling? What even was the definition of a tree in the first place? All Ashlock knew was that anything involving trees was incredibly slow. 5 years felt like a few months to him, so it made sense. Suddenly Ashlock felt a small jolt of chi. It was barely noticeable, like a fly landing on one's skin. Where did that come from? Sadly, Ashlock's system was rather barebones, and unless he acquired some kind of AI or diagnostic skill, he had to manually search for the cause himself. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary in the courtyard. It took a second for Ashlock to remember he had activities occurring in the mountain's depths. Ashlock liked to think he had made a lot of progress, but it had been 2 days and he had dug around 10 meters. 5 meters per day is horrifically slow. If I had to guess, this mountain is easily over 8,000 meters tall. It will take me 5 years to reach the base at this rate. Nevertheless, Ashlock felt his root network and soon located the small spike in chi. One of his deepest roots to the mountain's northern side had come across a small deposit of a silver rock. It seemed to shimmer like mercury but was as hard as iron. Ashlock wrapped his roots around the small deposit and felt some abhorrent chi from the rock. Some kind of mana stone. Chi stone? What would this even be called? Its name was ultimately not important, but rather the implications of its discovery. This mountain contained a rock that provided chi. Can I absorb this chi somehow? Ashlock tightened the roots around the rock and tried to capture as much ambient chi as possible. To his surprise, the amount was quite considerable, around the same rate he gained from his meditation technique. But there was a significant problem. The chi can't travel far up my root. Ashlock tried to suck the chi up the root and to his main body. But the attempt reminded him of that one time he tried to drink through a stupidly long straw. The distance, despite only being 10 meters, was simply too far. The chi frizzled out, absorbed by his root as it traveled, eventually becoming so weak it wasn't worth the effort. But Ashlock didn't plan to give up. There had to be a use for this underground deposit he had discovered. If he could talk, he would ask Stella if it was valuable and have her dig it up. But that was impossible. As Ashlock's deep root skill continued its operations, a thought manifested in the tree's mind. I am currently providing the chi necessary for the skill to function. But what if I used this rock to power the skill instead? Like a battery. Ashlock decided it was worth testing. Ashlock forced the skill to keep operating but cut off the chi supply to that root. He then waited. And waited. The root was still utilizing the chi that was stored within, but eventually, it paused. Unable to keep tunneling through the rock. The Mercy rock shimmered brighter as the roots surrounding it started forcefully sucking its chi away. It works. Ashlock was ecstatic as he watched the root he had cut off from his supply of chi continue tunneling down. And I still have a connection to it. How convenient. The root was still connected to Ashlock's main body, so he could supply it with chi if needed, but for now, it was deriving all its power from the mineral deposit. When Ashlock returned his sights to the courtyard, Stella was gone. A quick search and Ashlock found her back on the runic formation diligently cultivating. The sun was slowly setting, but it was hard to tell through the thick cloud cover. Ashlock awoke to a storm of horrific proportions. Thunder boomed like an awakened god throughout the land and rain pummeled Ashlock's leaves and branches, making them violently sway in the relentless winds. Then, using his Eye of the Tree God skill, Ashlock located Stella. Despite the unfavorable outside conditions, she sat with her back straight, eyes closed, and her hands wide open as if heralding the arrival of her savior. Her damp blonde hair was plastered against her face as purple flames roared to life across her skin, making her a beacon of light in the darkened world. Yet, even from here Ashlock could feel the chaotic chi rushing around with the storm, particularly around the runic formation that Stella so resolutely sat upon. So cultivating during a storm can lead to great benefits. Ashlock tried to activate his meditation skill, but nothing happened. The dense clouds blocked out any sunlight, turning day to night, and the wind made his leaves unable to capture anything. But, looking to the sky, Ashlock's sphere of vision had expanded to include the clouds above. Streaks of lightning illuminated the clouds in flashes of blue and white, followed by roaring thunder. Then suddenly, one of the streaks of lightning arced toward him like a coiling dragon hungry to strike. Ashlock's world went white as the lightning obliterated one of his branches. Lightning chi wrapped around Ashlock's trunk and arced between his branches, causing them to burn. Smoke bellowed from his left side, near the impact site, as a fire bloomed to life inside his trunk. Ashlock was delirious as horrendous pain spread throughout his body. Ashlock had burned himself on a stove once or twice back on Earth, but this felt worse. Way worse. Like gasoline pouring down his throat and then being set on fire from within. Tree. Ashlock's brain was fuzzy as his body fought against the invading fire. Like suffering from blood loss, moisture and sap were rerouted from his roots and lower body to deal with the blaze, causing him to become sluggish. As more and more of his body became charred wood, his cognitive functions decreased further. Tree. Don't die. Hey. Ashlock felt tender hands trying to climb up his 10-meter-tall trunk to the source of the blaze. Don't leave me all alone. Ashlock heard Stella cry over the howling wind. He then felt Stella's legs coiling around his branch as she was hung upside down. Stella thrust her purple flame-covered hands into the smoking hole and attempted to blast the flames away. Fight the flames, you stupid tree. You can do it. Stella cried out as residual lightning still arcing between his branches lashed out at the girl, forcing her to use her own chi to defend against the onslaught. Thunder and rain continued to roar, making Stella's shouting and insults harder and harder to decipher for the slowly dying tree. Despite Stella's best efforts, Ashlock was just a 5-year-old sapling with a pathetic amount of chi. Surviving a typical lightning strike would be possible for Ashlock, but one empowered with chi? Unlikely. Was this the end? Death by a stray strike from the gods? But right as everything was going dark, he saw 2 notifications flicker to life in his mind. Skill Fire Resistance D learned. Skill Lightning Chi Resistance C learned. It seemed the gods hadn't abandoned him after all. With his last bit of consciousness, Ashlock told the system to redirect all the ambient chi raging around his body toward his roots and chi fruit production skill. Tree. Stella's tears joined the rain cascading down his trunk and dripping from his leaves. Stay with me. Please. I have nothing left. Ashlock wanted to comfort the distraught girl, tell her he would be fine. Alas. He could not, the world faded, and his consciousness slipped into a deep slumber. Chapter 10, Fractured Mind. Stella felt helpless as the thunder roared in her ears, freezing rain cascaded from above, causing Stella to shiver and her breath to steam. Due to the relentless rain and her own efforts, the chi-powered flames from the lightning strike within the tree trunk finally died out. Stella collapsed to her knees before the charred trunk and mud splashed on her black cloak with the symbol of the Blood Lotus sect proudly embroidered on her chest. Tree. Why do you face the wrath of the heavens? Stella muttered to herself as she gazed up at the chaotic sky. Lightning flashed between the dark clouds as if ancient calamities were battling in the realms above. Stella knew that one day she would also face the wrath of the heavens. As a demonic cultivator, it was a natural part of her progression. Stella felt lost. Confused. Her eyes were unfocused as she set her sights on the smoldering tree. For her, the tree represented stability. It was always there, growing alongside her and offering fruits to relieve her hunger. It never spoke, but it didn't need to. She understood its desire for growth, yet she admired its selflessness for charity. Yet now, it was in a state of instability, half destroyed and lifeless. Its spirit was weak and barely noticeable, like a flickering candlelight in the howling wind. If she didn't help the tree somehow, it might be extinguished forever. Demonic cultivators like Stella were at the peak of selfishness. They destroyed, devoured, consumed everything for power. They cultivated the principle of one standing above all rather than defeating the beast tides through cooperation. But the tree not only took the chi of the dead as every demonic tree does, but it also recycled the dead into a new life. Through its fruits and its own growth. Stella felt the clouds above stir, and she made a decision that may be foolish, but she deemed it necessary for her future. Standing up, purple flames roared to life and the water drenching her body evaporated in a rush of steam. The mud caked on her shins also slid off as she stepped forward. Tree. I do not know why you face a heavenly tribulation so early. But let's face it together. When forming a star core, one will naturally attract the wrath of the heavens. Stella was still many layers away from such a threat, but it did not matter. She could not ascend to such a high realm in a mere 5 years. It was time to take a risk. Another roar of thunder rolled over the mountains as Stella used her movement technique. It was ill-advised to use chi-based techniques as her soul core took a long time to replenish, but she had no other option. Although she had super strength and could jump high, the tree was over 10 meters tall and had many branches in the way. A trail of purple flames manifested on the tree's trunk, and Stella sprinted up its side with her movement technique. Using her hand to shield her eyes from the relentless rain from above, Stella looked up at the sky from atop the tree with an unsettled mind. It's coming again. Stella could feel the restless chi as the world displayed displeasure for the tree's continued existence. Stella sat cross-legged on the highest branch and felt warm air rising from the open hole on the tree's left side where the lightning had struck and dying flames still festered. Purple fire shrouded the young girl's form as she braced for the impact of lightning. Unfortunately, she didn't have to wait long. The heavens made their anger known with another powerful strike. The world lit up as a lightning bolt arced out of a nearby cloud like a coiling viper eager to annihilate its prey. Stella screamed as the bolt struck her location as if drawn by the open hole of the tree below. The tree took the brunt of the impact, the lightning chi striking the wood but mysteriously doing far less damage than last time. Only managing to destroy another branch and leave a burning indent in the tree's side, which was quickly dispelled as if the fire struggled to keep the wood burning as fuel. Stella, however, didn't know of the tree's increased resistance to lightning and fire. So instead, she gritted her teeth as she tried to take on as much lightning as possible. Like last time, the tree's branches acted as a conductor, and the lightning chi, unable to penetrate the tree's 6th layer ambient chi, had no choice but to seek out another conductor, perhaps a fleshy human that had volunteered herself to become a lightning rod. Stella's hair frizzled as lightning that arced between the tree branches lashed at her. She clamped her eyes shut to avoid being blinded and instead concentrated on her breathing technique and keeping herself covered in purple flames. With the rain, the noise, the bright lights, and her overwhelming desire to protect, Stella had to concentrate harder than ever on maintaining her soul core and keeping it topped up with chi. As residue lightning struck her, she felt her chi deplete rapidly, but the chaotic chi and her concentration helped her rekindle her soul core's reserves. Despite the situation, a smile appeared on her face as she felt her progress quicken. It was hard to find adverse conditions to push her limits here alone on Red Vine Peak. So long as the tree survived. Today would be a good day. Ashlock awoke, and he felt drunk. An unfathomable headache wrecked his mind from within, and his vision, despite being spiritual, was fragmented, limited, and blurry. Tiny jolts of pain around his branches helped jumpstart his mind and focus. Like getting slapped in the face. Idolatry Daily Sign in System. Day, 2008. Daily Credit, 33. Sacrifice Credit, 0. Sign in. Ashlock's mind spun into gear, and he focused on the numbers of the daily sign in system. The fact there were 33 unspent daily credits suggested a month had passed by. What happened? He questioned himself in a sluggish voice. The fact he was missing half his vision and his body felt wrecked helped jog his memory of the fact he had suffered a rather hefty attack from the sky. Looking around, Ashlock's blurry vision picked up gray stones with glowing silvery lines like shimmering mercury. Concentrating on one thing was challenging. His mind was drowsy and drifting in and out of consciousness. But even in the haze, he could see a girl shrouded in purple flames sitting atop him with her eyes closed and breathing steady. If he looked a little closer, sparks of purple lightning ran through her hair and between her fingertips. Slowly, over the course of an hour, Ashlock was able to regain some focus without falling back asleep. Surrounding him in a circular formation were familiar stone blocks. If his memory served him correctly, they were the stones that made up the runic formation Stella used to cultivate. Did she move her runic formation to be around me? Ashlock wondered. He felt the subtle current of chi being pulled toward the formation. His leaves captured some of it, and the rest went in and out of Stella's lungs as she cycled her cultivation technique. Using his Eye of the Tree God, his mind screamed in pain, but Ashlock ignored it. He needed to get a full rundown of his condition, and without an aerial view, it would be impossible. Well, that doesn't look good at all. The left side facing the pavilion's kitchen was utterly charred black. It was hard to tell compared to his usual black bark, but the unburned side had a glossy and pleasant tint, whereas the burned side was jagged, raw, and untamed like the side of a volcano. Would this be considered a manly scar for a tree? Ashlock sadly chuckled to himself. It was apparent why he could no longer see anything in that direction, as the wood was dead and no longer part of him. It would seem the charred bark blocked the rest of his body from functioning. Alongside his destroyed half, he counted 9 dents, likely given by multiple lightning strikes. Sigh. I knew I would get hit by lightning eventually. It was just a matter of time. As a tree atop an 8,000-meter mountain, I would be the quickest route to the ground for any lightning strikes for miles. Ashlock remembered seeing the charred lifeless trees in the courtyard of the neighboring mountain. It was obvious what had happened to them. Canceling the skill, Ashlock returned to his fractured view of the courtyard and huffed in annoyance. This simply won't do. It's like someone is holding an eye patch over one of my eyes with weird holes through it. Ashlock tried to think of a solution, but like always, it resorted to his golden finger in this world. His system. Idolatry Daily Sign in System. Day, 2008. Daily Credit, 33. Sacrifice Credit, 0. Sign in. Yes, Ashlock said with a slur. And a notification popped up. User is too damaged to receive a system manifestation. Damage calculated at 67%. Repair body with credits. Yes/no. Oh, a repair feature. How helpful. Ashlock felt things finally going his way, so he happily pressed yes. 33 credits consumed. The few clouds littering the sky seemed to part as a golden ray of sunshine beamed down on Ashlock, illuminating him in a warm golden glow. Stella's eyes snapped open as she felt the heavenly light on her back. Looking down at the tree, she saw the smallest of the 9 holes seal up in front of her eyes. Tree. You're awake. How do you heal like that? A smile bloomed on her face. 3.3% of damage repaired. 63.7% remaining. Meanwhile, Ashlock was yelling at the system in rage. Stupid fucking system, a month's worth of credits for 3% of the damage to be repaired. Why didn't you tell me of this horrendous conversion rate? Oi! Give me back my points, you scamming bastard. Alas, the system cared not for his plight and the notification drifted away without a care in the world. Letting out a deep sigh, Ashlock felt his willpower to stay awake vacating him. Well, although it will be a slow process, I should heal naturally. Best to save my points for a new skill or something. Due to this new runic formation surrounding me, I am getting far more chi than before, so I should heal and cultivate faster. Tree. Hey. Don't sleep again. I will go get you food. Ashlock would really like to listen to the girl's ramblings, but sadly it would have to wait for another day. Or maybe another year. Chapter 11, Passage of Time. Damage calculated at 0%, sleep mode deactivated. Red Vine Peak had undergone some changes since Ashlock last saw it. The familiar purple grass courtyard was replaced with smooth gray stone of the highest quality engraved with a shimmering silver metal gleaming under the summer rays. A dense stream of chaotic chi danced around Ashlock as if he was the center of a grand whirlpool. The world's energy felt revitalizing, like a jacuzzi. Ashlock relished the pleasant feeling. Ashlock was oblivious to this world's common sense, but there was no way such a sizable runic formation was easy or cheap to build. Did Stella build all of this so I would heal faster? Ashlock inspected his body and confirmed the earlier system message was valid. He was fully healed and looked better than ever. The charred bark was gone, and the evidence of such an incident was lost with time. Only he and maybe Stella, if she became an immortal, would remember what happened. Ashlock hummed to himself as he looked at his branches. They were practically dripping in various types of fruit. Some had clearly been plucked recently as there were glaring gaps in a few fruit clusters. Perhaps Stella has been feasting on them. Ashlock glanced around and failed to spot the girl. Maybe she went out. A breeze blew by, rustling Ashlock's scarlet leaves, and it was only now in the stifling silence that Ashlock realized he was terribly lonely without Stella. Letting out a sigh, Ashlock decided to busy himself to pass the time. I should catch up on what's changed while I was sleeping. Status. Demonic Spirit Sapling, age, 7. Chi Realm, 7th stage. Skills. 7 years old. When Ashlock had fallen asleep, he had barely been halfway through the 5th year of his life. A part of him winced at the thought that a year and a half had seemingly vanished. Those were days he could never get back. But there was another startling point. He had gone up a stage in the Chi realm and was now at the 7th stage. Cultivating in my sleep seems a bit ridiculous. It made Ashlock think of all those people back on Earth that preached the importance of a side hustle that generated passive income. Isn't everything about being a tree passive? I have very little control over anything. Ashlock had successfully made himself sad again, so he looked at his skills to see if anything had changed. Eye of the Tree God A. Deep Roots A. Language of the World B. Chi Fruit Production C. Devour C. Hibernate C. Lightning Chi Resistance C-, Lightning Chi Protection B. Fire Resistance D-, Fire Chi Resistance C. Basic Poison Resistance F. Basic Meditation F. Ashlock paused for a while and read over his skills. They were mostly the same except for a new piece of UI that he had never seen before. My skills can upgrade? Once again, Ashlock wanted to smack himself for not thinking it was possible. His previous shock came from learning a skill outside of the sign in rewards. So, it was only natural he could upgrade his skills as well. However, what caused an upgrade was now a question gnawing at Ashlock's mind. Let's think. The two skills that upgraded were resistance skills, if my memories serve me correctly. I was struck at least 9 times by lightning strikes during that storm almost 2 years ago. Those lightning strikes were chi enhanced, likely due to the chaotic weather. So lightning chi resistance AC grade skill upgraded to lightning chi protection, a supposed B grade skill while I slept. Ashlock mulled over the difference in naming. His previous dismissal nature to the power of his skills had been cast away, and now if a skill was at the C grade or higher, he took them seriously. What is the difference between resistance and protection? As that was the only clue left for him by the system, Ashlock thought long and hard. Resistance means not being as affected by something, whereas protection outright stops the threat from ever doing any harm. So in terms of lightning, resistance should mean I would still get damaged by lightning, just not as much. Meanwhile, protection would be like a shield. Ashlock scrutinized the clear blue sky and silently begged the heavens to test him again with their vicious lightning. I have been an evil tree. Strike me down if you dare. Ashlock hollered at the mighty heavens while waving a metaphorical fist to the skies like a grumpy old man. A bird landed happily on his branch where it had made a nest and fed a gray slug-like creature to its awaiting children. Ashlock sighed. It was hard to give off evil tree vibes when a stupid bird could use his branches as free real estate. At least pay to stay here with shiny coins or something. Ashlock grumbled to himself. Right back to the skills, I keep getting sidetracked. Ashlock peeked back at the list, and there was one last skill upgrade. Fire resistance D minus fire chi resistance C. Well, this one is a little easier to figure out. The D grade skill clearly offers resistance to standard flames, whereas fire chi resistance will give me resistance to fire powered by chi rather than flames fueled by oxygen. It was interesting that the world considered them two separate things, and it would appear chi-based attacks are in a league of their own above standard elemental attacks. Anything else to check up on? Ashlock did plan to check his sign-in system, but first, he wanted to confirm everything else. How about down below? It had been about a year and a half, surely he had made some progress through the mountain. Ashlock struggled to hold back his shock as he felt down below. His roots spread for thousands of meters, and he was around halfway down the mountain at this point. Oh my god! Look at all these mineral deposits. Ashlock still did not know the true name for the silvery metal that seemed to power the runic formation, but the mountain was abundant with the stuff. Ashlock painstakingly counted over 100 such deposits spread throughout the mountain. To his relief, it seemed his roots had learned from the previous experience and were latched around each mineral deposit. Never underestimate the versatility and genius of an A- grade skill. As deep roots was one of his 2 grade skills, it was naturally a source of pride for Ashlock. Sadly, the mineral deposits only help me dig deeper rather than improve my own cultivation. Ashlock thought back to Deep Root's abilities. It allowed him to dig deeper and make tunnels. However, he hadn't tried the tunnel-making feature due to his low chi reserves and only discovering one mineral deposit. But now, with so much ambient chi surrounding him due to the runic formation and the many mineral deposits scattered throughout the mountain, he should be able to use that feature. Well, here goes nothing. Metaphorically closing his eyes, Ashlock willed the Deep Root skill to work its magic. Ashlock felt the ground tremble as the roots bulged outward, causing the rock to crack in protest. This doesn't seem very stable. Ashlock's thoughts were rendered useless as he watched his now slightly hollowed roots open up and consume the loose rock, and then, like a very slow conveyor belt, the pebbles were carried within the roots. But where can the stone go? Ashlock traced the direction the rock was heading in his mind. It wasn't upward or downward. Rather, it was sideways. Does the skill plan to dispel the rock out the side of the mountain? With anything tree-related, Ashlock would likely know the answer in a few days. If not months. Unfortunately, the rock being carried by the viscous sap within the roots seemed about as motivated to move as he was to stay awake, which was to say, not very motivated at all. Reminds me of public transport, so bloody slow. Ashlock chuckled at his memories from Earth before regaining his focus. Anything else to check up on? Ashlock used his Eye of the Tree God to scout out the pavilion for anything interesting. Oh look! The koi fish in the pond have had children, and they seem rather large already. To Ashlock, no time had passed at all. One moment, he closed his eyes with half his body scorched and ruined, and the next time he awoke to a fully healed body. The rapid passage of time was jarring and hard to ground in reality, but little things like seeing baby fish in the pond let Ashlock comprehend the passing of time. Other than the new fish, some plants were added to the exotic garden, and some had grown slightly more mature. Good to see my fellow plants are doing well. His roots were so expansive at this point that they ran below the entire pavilion, meaning some of his ambient chi seemed to be helping all the plants in the courtyard's bloom. Despite the pavilion's immense size, as usual, it was desolate of people. It was like an abandoned site that would soon succumb to nature, but a few traces of footsteps amongst the dust suggested some recent activity. Ashlock checked around the entire mountain, including the steps, and even peeked into the misty fog of the neighboring peak, but alas, there was no sign of Stella. Since there was nothing else to do, Ashlock summoned his system. Alright, time to sign in. Idolatry Daily Sign-in System. Day, 2774. Daily Credit, 766. Sacrifice Credit, 0. Sign in. Wow. Ashlock was aware that a lot of time had passed, but seeing it in numerical form really hammered in the fact that over 700 days had passed. Now the question is, should I save up or spend now? Ashlock sat there for a few hours, mulling over the decision. As a tree, he had patience and time on his side. There was no threat breathing down the back of his neck demanding he spend right away. So he should wait, right? The door to the pavilion swung open. Its creaking door broke Ashlock from his thoughts as a familiar but somewhat different face entered. That is almost freaky. The girl in Ashlock's mind didn't match up with the young lady. When he had last seen her, she was a 13-year-old girl who reminded him of a scared kitten, but she was now almost 15 and walked with far more purpose and pride than before. Puberty was no joke as she had changed considerably in such a short time. Stella was a little taller, had sharper features, and the demeanor of a scared child was long gone. Her black cloak, which had seemed a little baggy and odd for a child to wear, now fit her form perfectly as she strolled into the courtyard. As she got closer while subconsciously twirling the black wooden-handled daggers in her hands, her face was a cold mask almost unrecognizable. Ashlock groaned. Has she become one of those ice-cold beauties I heard so much about? Sadly, it seemed to be the case as the girl that had once been so bubbly and full of life coldly appraised the courtyard, meticulously checking every runic stone underfoot as she walked. It wasn't until she was a few steps from Ashlock that her head snapped upwards, and her eyes went wide. The cold facade vanished and Ashlock once again saw the vulnerable child with an odd obsession with a tree return. Tree. She practically threw herself forward and placed both palms on Ashlock's freshly healed trunk. You took far too long to heal, so I built this runic formation for you. Hee hee. She nervously stepped back and rubbed her cheek as she surveyed the courtyard. Hope you don't mind. I did have to destroy the rather scenic courtyard to make space for it, but it should be worth it. Ashlock found the sudden change in her demeanor around him rather amusing, maybe even a little endearing. Glad to see she is doing well. When Ashlock had seen the cold look on her face a moment ago, he was worried the lack of his presence had sent her down a dark path. So Tree. How have you been? Feeling better? Stella leaned forward and patted his trunk, her blonde hair fell forward, revealing the red leaf earrings he had gifted her all those years ago. Oh boy, do I have a story to tell you. The young woman collapsed onto the bench, which Ashlock noticed had been upgraded to a lovely hand-crafted oak bench. Stella went to open her mouth. So noisy. Ashlock grumbled and skillfully dropped a large fruit on her head, causing the girl to yelp. What was that for? Stella shook her fist at the tree in a playful manner and giggled while biting into the fruit. Yummy. Oh, speaking of food. I went hunting this year and have some snacks for you. A ring on Stella's hand flashed with chi, and suddenly the entire courtyard was filled high with monster corpses of every type imaginable, and Ashlock could barely hold back the sudden surge of hunger. It was time to feast. Chapter 12, A Pact with the Devil. Stella lay back on the oak bench like a slothful empress as she snacked on the plentiful fruit dropping from Ashlock's branches. She had an idle hand resting on Ashlock's trunk as she felt the chaotic chi rampaging throughout the tree's giant body. It was fascinating to witness. Some mystical force she couldn't understand was micromanaging the chaotic chi by condensing it into fruit or pushing it down into the tree's roots. To Stella's surprise, the tree did not push back on her invasive chi like last time. Instead, it welcomed her like a guest, making her feel warm. So bringing you snacks is the way to win you over. What a glutton. With a light chuckle, Stella pushed her hair behind her ear and smiled as she surveyed the courtyard. Black vines covered in tiny thorns had sprung up through the gaps in the runic formation and mummified as many of the corpses as possible. The stench of blood wafted through the air, but Stella didn't mind. Instead, she laid back peacefully, closed her eyes, and quietly hummed to herself as she enjoyed the summer breeze. This is so much easier than last time. Ashlock hummed to himself as he let the system take care of the chaotic chi. With the inclusion of his vast root network, he could shove endless amounts of chi down into the mountain. Although it felt rather wasteful, he had no other way to store the chi anyway due to his low cultivation, so he might as well speed up the progress of his mountain delving project. A week passed, and Stella lounged on the bench for most of it. These cultivators are a completely different breed of human than those from Earth. If Ashlock had been reborn in a park back on Earth, the humans would stay for an hour or two at most before having to attend to something. But in a cultivator world, the pursuit of strength required patience, discipline, and meditation, all of which could be achieved under the canopy of a friendly tree. By now, the courtyard was nearly empty of corpses. Only a pile of bones and a blood-stained runic formation remained. Sensing his calming chi, Stella's eyes fluttered open, and as she stretched her back, she yawned. Had your fill, tree? How was it? Good question, Ashlock said to himself as he summoned his sign-in system to check. Idolatry Daily Sign-in System. Day, 2781. Daily Credit, 773. Sacrifice Credit, 1827. Sign in. Holy shit. That is 5 years worth of credits. Ashlock's leaves rustled and swayed as he got excited. 1,000 credits got me A- grade skills. But I have 2,600 now. Ashlock quickly calmed down and got serious. Should he draw? What if the requirement for a skill higher than an A grade was 3,000 points? Or 10,000? The words were at the tip of his non-existent tongue. He wanted to say them so badly. Fuck it. Sign in. Sign in successful, 2,600 credits consumed. Unlocked an S-grade summon, Worldwalker. Summon. Worldwalker. Ashlock's mind blanked. I can summon things? Since when? Summon, Worldwalker? Yes/no read latest chapters on no/v/e/lb and com. Ashlock didn't hesitate and pressed yes. Stella stepped back from the demonic tree with a concerned look. The chi surrounding the tree had suddenly become chaotic like a raging storm, bolts of high-charged chi like lightning flashed out, and the tree glowed with power. Stella looked up, above its scarlet leaves. A crack in reality appeared. It was a single black line without depth, shadow, or light. Something simply impossible. Purple flames sprung to life across Stella's shoulders and arms, lightning crackled between her fingers with uncontrollable fury. She activated her earrings and artifacts she had learned to control over the years. Her eyes became swirling abysses, anything that gazed at them would feel uncontrollable terror. She wanted to be prepared for what was coming. The black line opened. An eye without a pupil, easily 3 trees tall, glimpsed through the gap in reality. It shifted, scrutinizing everything with alien curiosity. Ashlock was baffled. What on earth was going on? He could only watch in absolute horror at what was occurring. In moments like these, Ashlock realized the system was not to be trifled with. His branches suddenly began to grow rapidly upward, toward the rift in reality, like a hand of spindly fingers reaching for the stars. The branches elongated but withered as they approached the alien eye that gazed on in amusement. Summon failed. Cultivation deemed too low. What? Ashlock roared in his mind as the branches cracked and flaked away in the presence of the rift. No, my credits. Ashlock watched in horror as the tower of cards came crashing down and years' worth of effort crumbled before his eyes. The rift began to close, the eye lazily moving away, leaving only a hazy vision of the demonic land beyond. But a small figure, a mere dot of white compared to the gargantuan crack in reality, sprang through before the rift sealed and its immense pressure vanished. The creature landed gracefully on Ashlock's largest branch and curiously looked around. It was a squirrel. The most mythical one Ashlock had ever seen. Its snow-white fur was like silk against Ashlock's bark, and its golden honey eyes gleamed with intelligence as it examined around and crossed its arms in a suspiciously human manner. Wishes to form a pact. What? A pact? There was no way in hell Ashlock was signing a devil's contract with a mythical squirrel that had just emerged from another realm where a creature with an eye the size of a skyscraper lurked. The information flooded Ashlock's mind. A pact was a partnership where the mutual parties agreed to coexist peacefully. It differed significantly from a summon as it didn't involve mind control. Can I change the conditions? Ashlock wanted to include Stella in the pact. Life without her company would be too painful at this point. The squirrel received the altered pact and looked down at Stella. The young woman had clearly not noticed the squirrel, as she had deactivated her purple flames and glared at where the rift had closed with a distraught expression. Ashlock then saw the squirrel materialize on Stella's shoulder, scaring the ever-living shit out of her. What? Ashlock looked back at his branch and sure enough, the squirrel had vanished. How did it do that? He hadn't felt any chi fluctuations, and the coverage of his immediate surroundings was perfect. Stella glared at the creature and was frozen in shock as the squirrel poked her cheek with its small finger. Stella still had her earrings of absolute fear equipped and active, yet the squirrel's golden eyes looked straight into Stella's without flinching. Then, the squirrel reached up and poked Stella again, this time on the nose, causing her to yelp. Stop it. What are you? Stella pushed the squirrel's finger away with her own. However, the squirrel didn't resist Stella's touch and instead held the tip of her finger in its tiny hand. It then pulled Stella's finger closer, pressed its head forward into Stella's palm, allowing the startled girl to give it a head massage. Stella's expression went from shock to utter adoration in seconds. "Oh my, aren't you the most precious thing ever?" Stella exclaimed, and the squirrel's desire for head rubs grew, so it forcefully gripped the side of Stella's hand and moved her hand up and down, its eyes closed in apparent bliss. Ashlock watched the scene and felt a little left out. He wanted to give the demonic realm jumping squirrel a pat on the head too. Stella giggled as she played with the squirrel's fluffy tail swooshing in the summer breeze. Then, as she stared into the squirrel's curious golden eyes, she said with a smile, "Little guy, I think I will call you Maple. How about it?" The squirrel gave Stella a thumbs up, much to her shock, before vanishing into thin air. Maple has accepted the pact. Without any warning, the squirrel had reappeared on Ashlock's branch. Ashlock tried to hide his utter surprise. "Maple, huh? Welcome aboard." The squirrel nodded his head as if agreeing with his welcome. "Wait, you can understand me." Ashlock's mind spun with possibilities. Maple tilted his little head and gave a curious smile. Ashlock couldn't tell if the squirrel was doing random movements or understood him. "Do a spin." Maple rolled his eyes but complied, pretending to chase his tail. The scratching of his claws against Ashlock's bark seemed to draw Stella's attention as she started rushing toward the tree. "A squirrel might chase its tail for fun without me asking." Ashlock grumbled at his own stupidity. "Do a flip. There's no way a squirrel would do that randomly for fun." Maple paused, crossed his arms, and shook his little snow-white head with a look of disapproval. As if in retaliation for being demanded to do party tricks, the little bugger pulled free a fruit and munched on it. "Maple!" Stella called from below. "You up there?" The little bastard vanished with a pop and reappeared on Stella's shoulder, passing her a fruit it stole. "Oh, thank you." Stella took the fruit and gave the little guy a rub on the head. "You little shit." Ashlock seriously debated activating his hibernate skill, even that torture would be better than being looked down on by a fucking squirrel. Sigh. The life of a tree wasn't easy. Chapter 13, A Tree's Evil Plan. Stella's heart beat loudly in her chest. Maple's silky fur helped calm her mind somewhat, but it was still racing. What was that portal? That eye? I have never heard of such a thing. Stella sat on the oak bench with her back leaning against the tree. Why did the tree grow rapidly upwards to try and get inside that fracture in space? Does tree want to escape here? Stella hummed to herself as she gave Maple head rubs. The little squirrel was also a mystery, appearing only moments after the rift had closed. Stella had naturally checked the squirrel for chi, but it had none. Which made no sense. Everyone and everything should have some chi. Because without chi, there is no life. Chi is the soul's will to enact change in the world, so without any chi, did Maple not have a soul? Was it even alive? Stella let out a sigh. At the end of the day, her useless thoughts meant nothing. Maple was friendly, and so was the tree. Whatever secrets they held were none of her business. Stella was glad the pavilion was vacant in moments like these. Silencing the maids about such an event would be troublesome. Shaking her head, Stella decided it was time to go out and train. Her cultivation had soared since she assimilated her chi with the Tao of Lightning, but there was still a long way to go until she could pass the Grand Elder examination looming over her head. Maybe I should just give in and practice those demonic cultivation techniques like the others. A cold shudder went down Stella's spine. She rarely left the Red Vine Peak or interacted with other sect elders. They hid it well, but their heart demons were festering and slowly devouring them. Any quick and easy path to power was bound to have some devastating drawbacks, one Stella wished to avoid. Tree, I have 3 years until the Grand Elder examination. While you were sleeping, I reached the 5th stage of the Soul Fire realm. I may need to leave here for a year or so to train. Will you be fine here? Stella naturally didn't expect an answer, so she stood up to leave. However, to her surprise, Maple began tapping her shoulder. What is it, little guy? Stella asked while stroking his head. Maple gave a thumbs up. Stella tilted her head at the odd gesture. Maple pointed to the tree and then did another thumbs up. Tree. Thumbs up. Stella stroked her chin. Are you telling me Tree is fine with me leaving? Maple seemed frustrated with her answer but nodded his little head anyway. Stella shrugged at the squirrel's bizarre behavior, but it was a wild animal, so it would know more about a tree's mood than her. Wait a second. Can you understand? The tree. It was well known that the most powerful spirit trees had spirit beasts or guardians that kept them safe as they often couldn't defend themselves. Follow the latest novels on no/Belbin.com. Maple nodded vigorously. Stella furrowed her brows as she tried to process the strange situation. She had debated many times if she was crazy for talking to a tree all day, but now she was communicating with a mystical squirrel. Then, a possibly silly thought crossed her mind. Does the tree like my company? Tell her yes, you little bastard, Ashlock pleaded with the squirrel. Since the little thing wasn't an actual summon but a creature he had made a mutual pact with, he couldn't demand the squirrel do anything, he could only politely suggest and hope it complied. Maple looked at Ashlock with a grin and raised his little hand and, like a Roman emperor, had a thumb to the side. He then slowly tilted it downwards. I will make you some acorn-looking fruit. How about it? Maple's little thumb changed direction and turned upwards and then gave Stella a nod. Ashlock breathed a sigh of relief as Stella's eyes lit up in excitement. The tree likes me. Relief seemed to wash over the young woman, and a bright smile appeared. I'm so glad. Does he want more food? I can get him some while I train outside. To Ashlock's surprise, Maple nodded without Ashlock begging him to. Had the squirrel just been messing with him this whole time? To be fair, Ashlock had only known the little guy for a few minutes. Not even an hour had passed since he had attempted to summon an S-rank existence from an alternate plane of reality. Well, that settles it then. Stella stood up and started to leave the courtyard. Want to come with me, little guy, or stay here? Stella asked the squirrel while patting his ear. The squirrel vanished from her shoulder, reappeared on Ashlock's trunk, grabbed a cluster of red fruit and then rematerialized on Stella's shoulder. Maple then lay happily over Stella's shoulder while casually scoffing the fruits, causing his cheeks to inflate like a hamster. Are those travel rations? Stella giggled. Guess you are coming with me then. Keep Stella safe and bring some corpses for me if you can. Ashlock said as the pair left the peak. Maple gave him a little thumbs up as they shut the door and descended the mountain. Despite Stella's surprising speed with purple flames erupting from her feet, Maple seemed very chill with the whole situation, not even needing to hold onto her cloak to stay attached. As expected from a squirrel that could survive in such a place. Ashlock sighed and hoped he would never have to feel fear like he did today ever again. The whole situation had tired Ashlock, so he decided to nap. Ashlock awoke to some light rain with some excitement. He looked to the sky in search of angry clouds that would strike him down with their wrathful lightning. Sadly, the clouds seemed relatively tame, more gloomy than black. Oh well, a bit of rain is always nice. Although Ashlock used chi to speed up his biology and supplement nutrients that he would be lacking due to the scarcity of nutritious soil, receiving things like rain and sunlight helped a lot. Ashlock felt much better thanks to his 3-day nap, and his mind was now clear. Without the distraction of Stella or Maple, he could now process the events. Right. Where to even start? I guess the first thing to acknowledge is the ability to summon things. So I can gain new skills, acquire items that I can store in my inventory, and now I can even summon things. Ashlock wondered what other great mysteries he had yet to discover regarding his system. Well, one thing I can add to my list of system knowledge is that 2,600 credits gave me my first S-grade draw. A tingling feeling ran through Ashlock's sap as he remembered that alien eye gazing at him with curiosity. The summon failed. Which brings a whole new question. Will I never be able to get anything S-grade until I have upgraded my cultivation? Since the S-grade sign in reward failed, would he also be unable to use an S-grade skill if he unlocked one? Luckily, Maple came through the rift and formed a pact with me, so it wasn't a total waste of points. But what if I got an S-rank item that was impossible for Stella to use? Maybe I should stick to A- grade draws for now. Deciding that was a good idea, Ashlock chose to pull up his stats to check on his increase in cultivation. Devouring that many monsters should have led to an increase in my cultivation stage. Demonic Spirit Sapling, age, 7. Chi Realm, 8th stage. Skills. As expected, his cultivation realm had increased from the 7th to the 8th stage of the Chi Realm. So I only have one more stage to go until the Soul Forge realm. If Ashlock remembered correctly, a cultivator creates their soul core at the Soul Forge realm. So once I reach the 9th stage of the Chi realm, I will attempt to form a soul core, and if I am successful, I will be considered a soul fire cultivator. Ashlock then thought of Stella mentioning her realm. Then, after the soul core has been formed, a cultivator can climb the next 9 stages in the soul fire realm. Simply put, at the Chi realm, before forming a soul core, a cultivator can only harness the Chi within themselves to empower their muscles and live longer lives. If Ashlock wanted to cast external spells with his Chi, he would need his own fire. just like Stella's purple flames or the Grand Elder's white flames. So to obtain a personalized fire, Ashlock needed to form a soul core. But the system lets me cast skills. But now that I think about it, these are closer to magic than those fire-based abilities I've seen Stella use. Ashlock hummed to himself as the rain drizzled on his leaves. All this cultivator talk is rather hard to wrap my head around. But the last thing to note is that Stella is at the 5th stage of the Soul Fire realm, below the Star Core realm of the Grand Elders. Another bird landed on Ashlock's branch to shelter from the downpour. If I was in the Soul Fire realm, I could cook this bird in the flames of my soul. For fun, Ashlock tried to fry the bird with his Chi realm cultivation, but all that happened was his Chi became chaotic and rushed around the bark just below the bird. If this pest would land on the ground and stay still, I could cast Devour, but up here is out of the skill's range. Ashlock then looked closely and saw the bird nibbling on one of his fruit. In pure spite, Ashlock summoned his Chi fruit production menu, selected the cluster of fruit the bird was happily eating, and planned to alter the taste to be as bitter as possible. But then Ashlock paused. I have basic poison resistance, shouldn't I be able to make my fruit poisonous since I consumed poison to gain resistance? Ashlock chuckled evilly as he found the option to add poisons. Finally, I can fight back. Haha. Ashlock calmed down, it was time to formulate a battle plan. The bird seemed to like the red fruit. There was a slider for the fruit's poisonous level on the menu. I assumed the highest level would be the same as the poison the servant tried to use to assassinate Stella. If it can kill a soul fire cultivator, surely it can kill a stupid bird. Mashing the slider all the way to the maximum, a prompt appeared. Time for completion, 3 days. Ashlock hit accept and then patiently watched the bird. Enjoy your last few days, you parasite. Soon you will fall into my waiting clutches. Just stay for 3 days. Alright. The bird had its fill and left a few hours later once the downpour ceased, leaving Ashlock to curse the bird's 9 generations for making him waste Chi. But more victims would arrive eventually. All he had to do was be patient. Something he was a self-certified expert in. Chapter 14, Assassin Tree. Fruit production complete. Ashlock metaphorically rubbed his hands together in glee as he watched the open skies, eagerly anticipating a victim. The juicy red fruit hanging from his highest branches should be too tantalizing for any bird to resist. Due to being in the 8th stage of the Chi realm, Ashlock had little trouble using his Eye of the Tree God skill for extended periods of time. So while waiting for his prey, he decided to check on his surroundings. Ashlock surveyed the entire mountain, searching for something interesting. As he zoomed in on a particularly steep section of the mountain, he watched a pebble go into free fall. Tumbling down for 1,000 meters, it smashed into many pieces upon impact with a lower part of the peak. Following the path it took, Ashlock located a small hole in the side of the mountain. Did one of my roots finally reach the edge of the mountain? It was hard to explain to a human, but as a tree, he could feel everything at once, but his mind could only process so much. His body covered thousands of meters when his roots were included, so keeping track of everything was difficult unless something alerted him to an issue such as pain. After checking with his roots, Ashlock confirmed that his suspicions were correct and that the sap conveyor belt was indeed fully operational, with pebbles on the move. This was good news as the widening of his roots to create a hollow tunnel inside required the removal of the surrounding rock. I would have hoped the rock could be teleported away or stored in a spatial inventory and then dumped somewhere else. That would be a far more efficient solution, but with Ashlock's current skillset, this was the best he could do. It was slow, but at least it would eventually get the job done. You never know when you will need an escape tunnel. I could also get Stella to go down there and mine the Chi minerals. Ashlock had long grown accustomed to the way trees had to think. Human decision-making is often short-term, but Ashlock's slow biology forced him to plan for days, weeks, and sometimes even months in advance. For example, if he stumbled upon a secret room with treasure within the mountain in a few months, and he hadn't started the tunneling process now, it would take another few months before he could get Stella or Maple to retrieve the treasure. For now, the tunnels are only wide enough for Maple if I drain all the sap from them. So it will take a while until Stella can crawl through. Ashlock watched as another pebble was pushed out the opening on the mountainside and tumbled to its demise. Ashlock felt some weight on his branch, so he cancelled out his Eye God skill and found himself back in the courtyard surrounded by many rings of stone covered in runic formations. On his top branch was a curious bird. It was an ugly thing, similar to a vulture, with its gray feathers, crooked neck and rounded beak with a sickly black tongue hanging out. Its beady eyes locked onto the red fruit and it shuffled closer. Yes. Ashlock's leaves rustled slightly, causing the bird to look around as if watching out for predators. Ashlock immediately calmed down and quietly moved his chi away from the bird to avoid any issues. The vulture completed its surveillance and then returned its attention to the fruit. It got closer. Then, much to Ashlock's dismay, the bird seemed to sniff the fruit and reel back in disgust. It can smell the poison. Darn it, didn't think of that. Ashlock thought back to when the servant tried to assassinate Stella. Ah, now I see why the poison was dissolved in a tea with a strong aroma rather than a cup of water. The poison must have a distinct smell. The vulture dropped down a branch and cautiously sniffed a bundle of purple fruits with black splodges. They were incredibly sour but were also packed full of chi. The bird seemed confident the fruit contained no poison, so it opened its beak and ate the entire bundle in a single bite. A big mistake. The vulture gagged at the extreme sourness, its face tensed up, and it couldn't see where it was going. Ashlock's bark was smoother than most trees, so the vulture lost its grip and plummeted to the ground 10 meters below. On the way down, it smacked its head on the armrest of the oak bench Stella often sat on. Then everything went silent. Ashlock stared at the unconscious bird in pure wonder. That was rather unexpected. Ashlock chuckled to himself. He never denied a free meal, so he cast Devour, and black vines erupted from the small patch of grass around him that wasn't covered in stone. The vulture was mummified, and by the next day, any evidence of the unlucky bird was long gone. +2 SC. 2 credits. Not too shabby. The bird was rather large and could detect poison, so it was no easy prey for a tree like Ashlock. Luckily his genius had prevailed and the bird was defeated fair and square. Feeling rather smug about his first ever successful kill with his fruit, Ashlock summoned the daily sign-in. Idolatry daily sign-in system. Day, 2781. Daily credit, 7. Sacrifice credit, 2ni/w. Novel chapters are published on no/vel/bin/co/m. Sign in. Now Ashlock was no gambling man, but he was feeling lucky. I can power farm points over the winter, and hopefully, Stella will return with many monster corpses to devour sometime next year. Ashlock only had a measly 9 credits to his name. But he rarely tested what rewards were available at the low end, so now was a great opportunity. Sign in. Sign in successful, 9 credits consumed. Unlocked an E-grade item, 10x lightning chi pills. Ashlock eagerly peered into his pocket dimension, where he had stored various items. Currently, only 10 cultivation pills remained as the earrings and wooden stick had been taken by Stella. Ah, the pills come in a small bottle, Ashlock said as he manipulated the items in his pocket dimension. He unscrewed the cap and took out a pill, feeling the lightning chi emanating from it. Can I absorb this pill? He wondered aloud. Ashlock wasn't sure what type of chi he had, but what could go wrong? It was just a single E-grade pill. Ashlock decided to crush the pill inside him, and as soon as he did, a storm of lightning chi rapidly expanded outward. However, Ashlock was not worried. His own chi came in like a tsunami, crushing the invading chi and snuffing out anything that remained. He suspected that this was due to his lightning chi protection ability. So it seems my body does not appreciate lightning chi, but this experiment does confirm that I can use pills at least. Ashlock was so lost in his thoughts that the day turned to night, and he didn't notice 2 men approaching the pavilion's door. A knock rang out, followed by a gruff voice. Stella crestfallen, are you inside? Obviously, there was no reply. Stella had left over a week ago to kill monsters outside the sect. Ashlock activated his Eye of the Tree God skill and observed the visitors. They were dressed from head to toe in black cloth and looked similar to ninjas. Dim blue flames coated their arms as if ready to flare up at the slightest threat. Ashlock still struggled to measure cultivators' strength, but these 2 had a similar level of presence as Stella. So they should be somewhere in the middle of the soul fire realm. The 2 looked at each other. The taller one chuckled, stepped back from the door, and lowered his hand. Seems the Grand Elder was right. The little rascal did leave her peak unattended. The other nodded and replied in a feminine voice, perfect, we want to leave as little evidence behind as possible while we search for the Grand Elder's brother's corpse. Yay, yay. The man sneered. You do your business, and I'll do mine, all right? The woman shrugged, and with a burst of blue flames around her feet, she flew over the pavilion walls and gracefully landed in the central courtyard. The man joined her a second later but landed a little awkwardly. The woman supported his arm, but he pulled himself away from her grip. I'm fine. He grumbled, go search inside. I'll look out here. The woman sighed as she summoned a dagger to her hand. Keep your wits about you, she said, her voice tense with concern. Stella crestfallen could be here somewhere, or the man who killed Darren. With that, she disappeared into the pavilion in a blaze of blue flame, leaving the man behind. "TSK," he muttered, stretching his back and looking around. "Just because you're a daughter of the Raven-born patriarch, you think you can order me around?" Despite the potential danger, the man didn't bother to hide his presence, instead choosing to crank up his soul fire and let the raging blue flames deter anyone who might be lurking nearby. He rubbed his chin as he walked over the extensive runic formation surrounding a large black tree with scarlet leaves. Now, if I wanted to hide a body or decapitated head, there's no way I would hide it inside a building. The man sneered as he looked off in the direction the woman had gone. There's no way she will find anything useful in there. I mean, it must have cost a fortune to build something like this. That Stella brat likely sold everything already. The man furrowed his brows, his eyes fixed on the tree. Why would Stella crestfallen, last scion of Red Vine Peak, sell everything she owns to build such an inefficient runic formation around a tree? He muttered, his eyes narrowed in thought. As he spoke, Ashlock could feel the presence of the man's flames growing stronger, as if they were beginning to cover his entire body. I think you might be the key to all this, the man said, his voice filled with suspicion. Ashlock started to panic. He had to admit being a tree in the center of such a dazzling formation made him a rather suspicious target. I can't talk to him, nor do I have any abilities to kill him. Unfortunately, Ashlock was no protagonist. Otherwise, he could cross cultivation realms and beat the guy even with his meager strength. Alas, Ashlock was a tree at the mercy of those stronger than him. He felt a sense of helplessness wash over him. Is this the end? He wondered as the man approached, his eyes scanning Ashlock's branches and pausing briefly on each of the many fruit clusters. Despite his fear, Ashlock tried to remain calm. There had to be a way out of this situation, right? Chapter 15, Give and Take. The man's attention lingered on each fruit as he stroked his chin and hummed to himself. After a while, the cultivator looked over his shoulder, scouring the pavilion's many windows, presumably for any sign of the female cultivator. As Ashlock nervously awaited his fate, he tried to devise a solution. But then a thought occurred to him. Did he even need a solution? After all, he was a tree. What problem could the cultivator possibly have with him? But then Ashlock tensed as the cultivator returned his sights to the fruit and casually reached up to grab a cluster of indigo fruit that looked similar to apples. As the man felt the weight of the fruit in his hand and caught the scent of chi emanating from it, the cultivator's smile grew wider. Then, the fruit vanished from the man's hand in a seemingly magical spectacle. The golden ring on his hand briefly glowed before fading back to its original dim state. Clearly, the ring had played a role in the fruit's sudden disappearance. A spatial ring, Ashlock grumbled as he watched the cultivator use the artifact to loot the fruits that had taken months to grow and required a significant amount of his chi. Classic cultivator trope. Carrying things in bags is so last century. Despite his annoyance, Ashlock couldn't help but envy the cultivator's use of the spatial ring. Ashlock rolled his non-existent eyes in frustration as the cultivator continued his looting spree. Luckily, I can grow these fruit back, so if it gets him to leave. Being robbed blind and feeling helpless to stop it was beyond infuriating for Ashlock. If he were a human, the cultivator likely would have killed for these fruits and looted his dead corpse without hesitation. The Grand Elder's offhand comments about the value of his fruit played in his mind. This tree is a great find. But I fear if the Ravenborns learn of its existence, they will storm in here unannounced and make a scene. These fruits alone would save them thousands of spirit stones a year in cultivation pills for their juniors. Despite his anger, Ashlock knew there was nothing he could do to stop the cultivator from taking what they wanted. He was just a demonic sapling. Blue flames shrouded the cultivator as he moved with impressive speed, grabbing hundreds of fruits as he dashed between Ashlock's branches in a blur. The ring kept flashing as the fruits vanished from the cultivator's hands faster than Ashlock could see. At the edge of Ashlock's perception of the courtyard, he felt one of the doors open. The cultivator, who was busy stealing his fruit, also noticed this and practically teleported back down the tree with the last bundle of fruit in his hand, a cluster of red berry-looking fruit. The cultivator's ring flashed, but the berries didn't vanish. Shit, it's full, the man muttered, his eyes widening in panic. He closed his eyes, likely trying to clear some space in the ring, but it was too late. The female cultivator had already appeared behind him in a single step. The man didn't hesitate any longer and threw the small clusters of fruit into his mouth and gulped them down. Two cold gray eyes peered through the mask of the female cultivator. I told you not to leave any evidence or take anything. The man didn't turn around, so her eyes narrowed. Popping pills on the job, are we? She asked with an irritated tone. I looked through the entire pavilion during this time. So what have you been doing? Found anything? The man didn't answer. Instead, he was frothing at the mouth as the brutal poison in the red fruit that acted like cyanide took full effect. His cultivation erupted as he tried to suppress the poison, causing the blue flames coating his shoulders to flare up. The female cultivator took a step back, and a sword materialized in her hand. Blue flames shrouded the blade, and she brought it up in a defensive position. Showing your true colors now, are we? She couldn't see the man's face. Ashlock watched the scene play out and considered his options. Ideally, they both leave, but I fear the man will die any second now. Will the woman think I killed the man and chop me down in revenge, or is that just paranoid thinking? Probably. Ashlock's mind raced as fast as his biology allowed. In a perfect world, the man would die, leaving his corpse here, and the woman would leave him alone. Was there a way to alter the course of this situation to his ideal outcome? Ashlock brought up his status screen to recheck his skills. Demonic Spirit Sapling, age, 7. Chi Realm, 8th stage. Skills. Visit novelty/nc/om for latest novels. Eye of the Tree God A. Deep Roots A. Language of the World B. Lightning Chi Protection B. Chi Fruit Production C. Devour C. Hibernate C. Fire Chi Resistance C. Basic Poison Resistance F. Basic Meditation F. Yay, as expected, other than Devour, I still lack any offensive abilities. But, wait. What about my inventory? Ashlock still had the bottle of lightning chi pills. Ashlock suddenly came up with an idea, one so nefarious he almost felt evil. She already thinks he is popping pills on the job, why not make it a reality? The bottle of pills I got was so cheap anyway. Similar to how he summoned the wooden stick all those years ago, Ashlock concentrated on the pill bottle and it suddenly vanished, rematerializing in the air in front of the male cultivator right as the man was turning around. The female cultivator behind the man watched as the open pill bottle fell and 9 pills spilled out onto the purple grass. So you plan to betray me? She cursed. Without hesitation, she brought up her burning blade and, in a dazzling display of swordwork, not only decapitated the man but also chopped off all 4 of his limbs. Ashlock desperately resisted the hunger as a soul fire realm cultivator's blood painted his roots and bark. The purple grass went a darker shade as the various body part fell to the ground with a thud. The woman expertly shook the blade once, successfully removing all the grime that had coated the sword. She then placed the clean weapon into her spatial ring while looking around the empty courtyard. Deeming the surroundings safe, the woman finally removed her mask and hood, revealing short black hair that gave her a tomboyish appearance. She took a deep breath, shook her head with regret, and walked toward the corpse with a sigh. It seemed killing the man had been a regretful affair. Despite her cute face, her cold gray eyes betrayed her true demeanor as she searched one of the man's chopped-off arms for something. A second later, her dull eyes lit up slightly, she bent down and pulled the golden spatial ring containing Ashlock's stolen fruit free from the man's finger. Whistling to herself, the woman pocketed the spatial ring. Then to Ashlock's horror, she approached him. She observed his naked branches stripped clean of fruit with a hint of suspicion. Hum. She hummed to herself as she traced a finger down Ashlock's smooth bark but then paused. Chi. Her head tilted. Ashlock had tried to make himself appear as innocent as possible by directing all of his ambient chi away when she approached, but it seemed to have been unable to fool a soul fire cultivator's intuition. The woman closed her eyes and Ashlock felt a pulse of invasive chi. He practically scurried away inside his own body, fleeing from the woman's unbelievably powerful chi with all his might. Her eyes fluttered open, a spirit tree. Although a rather weak one. She shrugged and stepped away. The discovery of a spirit tree seemed not all that impressive to her. Now, what to do about this? The woman sighed as she looked at the many bits of human scattered across the purple grass. There were even pieces on the runic formation, dyeing the stone red. This should be a demonic tree, right? They like bodies. Getting to work, the woman piled the many body parts up against Ashlock's trunk, which made his hunger unbearable. Then, happy with her work, she scooped up the pill bottle and thunder chi pills, which made Ashlock grumble as heat. Hoped she would leave them behind. Well, it's clear where Grand Elder's brother's corpse went with the demonic spirit tree here. The woman turned on her heel with a frown. This will be a lot of trouble. Blue flames erupted around her feet, and with a spectacular leap, she crossed over the pavilion's walls and shot down the mountain with breakneck speed. Those words were rather ominous, but Ashlock didn't care as hunger consumed him. Finally, Ashlock cast devour black vines erupted from the ground and mummified all 5 pieces of the cultivator. A few hours passed, and the message he had been looking forward to appeared in his mind. Plus 100 SC. Along with the message came a rush of chi that Ashlock now knew was the sign of a stage advancement. As the sun crested the horizon to signify the start of a new day, Ashlock finally had his rampaging chi under control and had the state of mind to check his status. Demonic Spirit Sapling, age, 7. Chi Realm, 9th stage. Only one more realm to complete until I form my soul core. Ashlock felt a sense of excitement. That cultivator may have stolen all his fruit, but the body of a soul fire cultivator had provided him 100 days worth of credits and advanced him an entire stage. It's fine. Those pills were worth only a few credits, and my fruit will grow back quickly with the chi from this soul fire cultivator. Thinking of soul fire cultivators, Ashlock wondered how he was supposed to form a soul core. Was it something he should know how to do instinctively? Or perhaps he would need Stella to guide him? Ashlock looked out at the morning-lit courtyard and saw the runic formation dyed with blood in the scraps of clothing littering about. Well, this will be hard to explain to Stella when she returns. Chapter 16, Interlude, House Ravenborn. An hour later, on the neighboring peak shrouded in a perpetual fog, a woman ignored the hawking ravens that observed her while perched upon charred trees and made her way through the low-visibility courtyard with expert movements as if she knew the placement of every shrub and rock. Her black clothes and mask had been left with the maids at the entrance, so the tomboyish girl walked through the hallways of her family's pavilion in skinny trousers that showed off her modest curves and a partially open shirt. Diana, welcome home. Did the mission go well? A woman with a thin smile appeared from behind a doorway, causing Diana to pause and glance at the person with cold gray eyes. Diana sighed and ran a hand through her short black hair. No, mother. Unfortunately, there were some complications. Of course, there were. Diana's mother snapped, her smile turning into a vile smirk. If your brother was still alive, we would have sent him. At least he knew how to get shit done. Diana shoved past her mother, causing her to shriek even louder. If not for that Stella crestfallen bitch killing my son, I wouldn't have to deal with the likes of you. Diana clenched her fist as she stormed down the corridor. It wasn't her fault her brother died to Stella at the tournament 3 years ago. Yet ever since, as the new heir to House Ravenborn, she had been forced into a position she never wanted. Diana had found comfort living in her brother's shadow, with him outperforming her in every aspect possible. How did Stella kill her brother all those years ago? What had he seen that had instigated such fear he couldn't even move as he was struck down? It was a question that plagued everyone's minds. Was it an artifact? A rare martial technique? Nobody knew, and that's what she had been sent to investigate, among other things. It took Diana over 10 minutes to reach her room. She mostly ignored everyone as she passed through the corridors. Some returned the favor, while others stopped her to chat or pay respects. Being the scion of a powerful house was a tiresome affair that only put a large target on her back. She practically flopped onto her bed and relished its softness for a while in the safety of her room. She knew her father would want a report on the mission soon, so in the meantime, she fished into her pocket and retrieved the golden ring. Unfortunately, it still had the lingering scent of her cousin on it, which made her frown as the events of an hour ago played in her mind. Now that she thought about it, her cousin had acted very oddly. She despised him, like everyone else in the family, but killing her would make no sense. He wasn't in direct line for succession, nor was anyone on his side of the family. Wait, what type of pills did he drop? Diana opened her spatial ring within her mind and retrieved the pills. It was hard to tell without getting a feel of the ambient chi. These are lightning chi pills. Cousin practiced water cultivation techniques. These would kill him. What possible reason could he have to consume one? A flash of horror appeared on Diana's face. Had she made a mistake killing him? Of course, killing her cousin would earn her some enforced self-reflection or a beating, but it wouldn't be a massive deal so long as she could give a good explanation. Why was he acting so strange, though? Diana's eyes narrowed, and she sat up on her bed. The golden ring of her cousin was still warm and had some blood stains on it, which made Diana's stomach churn. Murder may be an accepted part of demonic sect culture, but it didn't make murder any easier. Closing her eyes, she got to work. One couldn't simply enter another person's spatial ring as they were sealed with their power. A monarch realm's spatial ring could only be opened by another monarch realm. So it was the same situation here. Luckily her cousin was weaker than her by a few stages in the soul fire realm, so she easily cracked its defenses within half an hour. Her shirt was damp with sweat as she wiped her brow with her sleeve and sighed. Finally done. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes again and felt inside the ring. Within was a pocket space around the size of her wardrobe, and it was stuffed full of fruit. Diana's brows furrowed in confusion. She didn't even recognize half the fruit in there. Had her cousin stumbled upon a remote area in the mountains? Or perhaps a secret realm? While her mind raced with possibilities, she summoned a random fruit, and it appeared in her hands. Instantly she caught a whiff of dense chi within the fruit, which was rare. Just to compare, Diana summoned a moon orange from her personal spatial ring. They were a great snack that many cultivators enjoyed due to their great taste and a minuscule amount of chi that helped them recover after a laborious cultivation session. Weighing the two different fruits in her hand, it was obvious the one from her cousin's ring contained many times more chi than the moon orange. Diana frowned and tried to remember the strict gardener's teachings from when she was young. Trees often produce fruit with tiny hints of chi to encourage the monsters that roam the wilderness to consume their fruit and deposit their seeds elsewhere. Of course, the same result can be achieved by making the fruit taste good. Diana then remembered the man's face turning dark as if remembering a horrifying memory. But monsters are infamous for their lackluster taste buds and almost insanity-inducing obsession with getting stronger. They devour us humans, bones and all, without batting an eye. Diana smiled at the memory. She had been so young, but that man never sugar-coated his words. Always answering her most burning questions with the vocabulary of a vulgar drunkard. Diana shook her head to remove these useless thoughts. In her hand was something of great value. Sure, the chi contained was too weak to affect her, but it showed there was a plant out there that could produce fruit with this much chi. I would guess it's around the 8th stage of the chi realm. Diana paused as she came to a realization. Assuming a tree produced this fruit, it would need to be a spirit tree. One that can cultivate. The normal wild trees can barely reach the threshold for the first stage of the chi realm. Diana rubbed her chin as the scene of her cousin's death played in her mind. She had found him standing in front of a demonic tree, one of the more common types of spirit tree throughout the wilderness. Even she had seen a few during her excursions out of the sect. They weren't known for producing fruit other than some poisonous berries. Weaker monsters ate these tiny berries, died a gruesome death, and then were digested by the tree's roots due to the slightly acidic mud. My cousin wouldn't have been stupid enough to eat the berries of a demonic tree. Right. Diana couldn't find another plausible explanation for his behavior. But there were still unsolved mysteries. Why did her cousin have lightning cultivation pills? Why is one missing, and where the hell did all this fruit come from? A knock at her bedroom door made her jump in her skin. Yay. Diana half replied as she put the fruit back in her cousin's ring and scrambled for a place to hide it. Diana Ravenborn, your father wishes to meet with you in the hall. A tired man's voice came through the door. Oh okay, I am just changing into appropriate clothes. I will be out in a second. Diana lifted a floorboard. Beneath, tucked between cobwebs and dust, was a small lockbox that blocked spiritual sense so others wouldn't detect its contents. The Grand Elder does not accept tardiness, young lady. You should have gone to greet him first. The man grumbled, and Diana heard the door handle click open. Diana gritted her teeth. Bastard doesn't respect me one bit. Then, before the man could get around the door and see what she was doing, she stuffed the ring into the box, shut it close, and pushed the floorboard back into place with a thud. She covered the sound with a loud yawn, making the man who had entered frown. Ahem. Diana pushed past the man. Let's go. Best not keep father waiting. I killed him. Diana sat lazily in a wooden chair with her head propped up by her arm. Across from her was her father, the Grand Elder of House Ravenborn. Despite her bold statement, her father barely flinched or showed any emotion. As expected of a Star Core cultivator. Even without him exerting his presence, everything in the room felt heavy. In fact, even sitting in his presence strained Diana's muscles, hence her slouched posture. The Grand Elder's gray eyes bore into his daughter's soul. Diana Ravenborn, you better have an exemplary reason. Your cousin may have been a blubbering fool, but our family's position hasn't been great since your brother's early death at the hands of the crestfallen heir. The man spat out the name of the girl that had consumed his mind over the past 3 years. The younger generation has been lacking behind the other houses. Only your brother was a true genius. Diana resisted, rolling her eyes. Her family would take any opportunity possible to compare her to her brother, despite him being long dead by now. No, father, my cousin was already dead. Although I didn't know that at the time. Diana continued before her father could open his mouth again. He ate the berries from a demonic spirit tree in the courtyard. Why he ate the berries? I have no clue. There was a long pause until the Grand Elder rose to his feet and walked across the room. Everything trembled as he walked, as if a tremendous force was pressing down from the heavens above. Diana, the demonic sect's way of life where the strongest rule, mirrors the wilderness that surrounds the Blood Lotus sect for thousands of miles. As the man walked, the floor creaked and his black robe swayed with his movements. This is why the celestial sects under the control of the Celestial Empire treat us rural demonic sects like savages. So why must you play into the stereotype of our people by slaughtering your cousin in cold blood? Father. The man shot her a glare, so fierce her words got caught in her throat. I mean, Grand Elder. Diana quickly corrected herself. I already told you he killed himself by consuming a demonic tree's poisonous berries. The Grand Elder pinched the bridge of his nose in frustration. Daughter, I will not believe for 1 second that a man carrying some of my genes would be foolish enough to consume such obviously poisonous berries while on a strategic mission. Then, letting out a profound sigh, he turned around and went to stand before a window that gazed out upon the vast Blood Lotus sect. I am surrounded by idiots. There was a pause. What of the mission? The man's voice was as cold as ice. Diana gulped. The pavilion was empty. Most of the rooms were covered in dust and decay. But I believe I may know where your brother's corpse went. The Grand Elder didn't turn to meet her gaze, as he already knew the answer. That crestfallen brat fed your uncle's cold corpse to the tree, didn't she? Maybe. Diana shifted nervously on her wooden seat. Her eyes darted to the door. She desperately wanted to leave before her father gave her a fitting punishment for her actions. But that is just my theory. There were no bones or any leftover possessions like those normally found around the roots of demonic trees. Useless. The Grand Elder's voice thundered through the room. The Patriarch has ordered me not to lay a single finger on that crestfallen brat because she is an up-and-coming prodigy of the sect. Diana felt a shiver go down her spine as her father smiled. He never smiled. Your punishment for this failure. The man's smile was sickening as he tapped his chin. Kill Stella crestfallen. Diana blinked at the words. Utterly gobsmacked. If even her father couldn't get away with killing the girl. He is using me as a sacrificial pawn. Discover new stories at no/elbenc/om. I don't care how you do it, but you must do it cleanly. The Grand Elder walked over and loomed over Diana. You hear me, brat? If you do not perform this task within the next 5 years, then it's time you face a beast tied. Alone. In other words, a death sentence. Either she killed Stella crestfallen and died at the hands of the Patriarch, or she went against her father's wishes, and he'd sent her on a suicide mission himself. Diana thought of the fruit in her cousin's spatial ring and how much she despised her family. Should she run away? Maybe Stella would know a way out of this predicament. It might be worth asking. Chapter 17, Eye in the Sky. With the beginning of a new day, Ashlock's mind had somewhat calmed, and he could rethink his situation. He had been under the false pretense that he was safe in this courtyard. Nobody worked here, and apart from the Grand Elder visiting, there was only Stella here, and he had no issue with her taking his fruit whenever she wanted. He had been naive, the equivalent of someone walking around a bad neighborhood flaunting excessive jewelry and then getting mad over being robbed as if it was a surprising turn of events. Truly foolish. The Grand Elder had mentioned ages ago how valuable his fruit was, and he had stupidly grown so much fruit that his branches were practically drooping from the weight. Yet he got angry when a demonic cultivator passed by and robbed him blind. Ashlock should be grateful he wasn't chopped down for firewood. At least the fruit can be regrown. But should it be? I have enough chi in my body from devouring that soul fire cultivator to regrow at least half those fruit within a month, but for what? Stella. Stella had been using the fruit as food and a cultivation aid since she didn't have a chef and couldn't afford to buy many cultivation pills. Which reminded Ashlock of the pills he had obtained for a few credits that he lost to that woman. The pills were a minor setback compared to the fruit, which had been on display and could be regrown. At the time, Ashlock had no idea the demonic cultivators were so ruthless to each other. Although the deployment of the pills at the male cultivator's feet had led to the woman chopping him down without further question, it was still regrettable to lose the pills that might have aided Stella. Okay, from now on, I will keep a low profile until I can protect myself. No more flaunting fruit or giving away freebies to invaders. Ashlock shouted his declaration to an empty courtyard. Only the chirps of birds and the summer breeze accompanied him. Ashlock debated sleeping until Stella came back, but the intense sun on his scarlet leaves filled him with energy, so feeling productive, he activated his God Eye skill and looked around. Reaching a new stage of his cultivation realm naturally led to a significant increase in his view range. I can now see the entirety of the neighboring peak. Ashlock remembered the experience of the Grand Elder staring straight at him, so he kept some distance. Luckily, he didn't have to investigate too hard to figure out who this peak belonged to because a very helpful engraved brass plaque over the pavilion's grand entrance read, House Reborn. As Ashlock watched the entrance, the door slammed open and a woman he recognized all too well strolled out. However, this time, she wasn't wearing her ninja outfit or a mask. Instead, her short black hair slightly obscured her gray eyes, almost brimming with tears. He hadn't noticed earlier, but her freckles suited her. Diana Reborn, what did your father tell you? A woman with similar but more mature features, likely the woman's mother, appeared behind the woman named Diana and grabbed her wrist. Do you think you can ignore me, you unfilial child? Diana frowned at her gripped wrist. I'm leaving, mother. The Grand Elder gave me a task. Diana looked away, refusing to meet her mother's intense glare. It will likely be my last. Leaving where? Last task. The mother's voice was shrill and hard to listen to. Come back inside, and let's discuss this. Her voice then drops to a whisper, if something happens to you, the other concubines will gain ground on me. Understand? Your father has refused my advances recently, and I fear I am on my way out of his chambers. After your brother's death, you became the next heir by default, but your talents don't match up to your brothers or cousins, so I fear the Grand Elder may try to dispose of you. Blue flames exploded around Diana's wrist, making the mother reel back in pain. I am leaving, mother. I have no wish to be your political pawn anymore. Goodbye. Diana forcefully pulled her wrist to her side, adjusted the wrinkles in her white shirt and pushed her hair behind her ear to keep it from falling in her face as she descended from her family's peak. Despite her mother's cries for her to return, Diana remained undeterred and even smirked as she watched her mother being dragged back inside by a group of maids, kicking and screaming. Read latest chapters on no/v/e/lb and com. Ashlock marveled at the sight of Reborn Peak, which, although not as tall as Red Vine Peak, still stood several thousand meters tall with clouds drifting lazily by. Yet, despite its impressive height, like a human comet of blue flames, Diana shot down its side with unfathomable speed, taking 100 steps at a time, never breaking her stride. I want legs. Ashlock grumbled. What's the point of being reborn in a world with superpowers if I'm stuck in place like this? Finally, in a surge of dirt, Diana arrived at the mountain's base with a grunt. She patted herself down and confirmed the few items connected to the loops in her jeans were secure. Then with one last look over her shoulder at her home, Diana sighed and strode down the paved road. Due to his increased view range, Ashlock could continue following Diana. After half an hour of walking, which wasn't far, considering how leisurely she was strolling with her hands clasped behind her head and whistling the whole time. As Diana crested a ridge, the edge of a town came into view. Wait. A town. Ashlock was almost on the edge of his non-existent seat in excitement. Deciding to allow Diana to take him on an unknowing tour, Ashlock's view remained far up in the sky, looking on from above. If only my skill let me see through walls. Ashlock didn't know why, but his skill had two restrictions. First, he always had a semi-bird's eye view, he couldn't go too close to the ground. The other was the inability to go inside buildings. Maybe if I get an X-ray skill, I could see through the walls? Or do I need to upgrade Eye of the Tree God into an S-grade skill through a lucky sign and draw? Ashlock removed the useless thoughts as he focused on the town. The snake-like roads paved with gray stone were flanked by multi-story wooden buildings with slanted slated roofs. These buildings followed a similar architecture to the pavilion Ashlock's body was stuck in with their classical Chinese style. Diana strode with the confidence of an empress down the crowded street. People of all ages who were relishing the warm summer weather moved to the side to let her pass. Most of them were dressed in subdued shades of brown or black, a reflection of the traditional style of the buildings that lined the street. In contrast, Diana's clothing stood out with its modern design that now caught Ashlock's attention for its unusualness. He had mistakenly assumed that her outfit was normal because it was a popular style back on Earth and hadn't noticed its distinctiveness in this unfamiliar setting. Even Stella wore a more traditional cloak. So why does Diana dress like that? Whatever its purpose, it was evident by how people scurried to the side to avoid her path that she had a reputation. Likely a bad or tyrannical one. Or is it her family's reputation? Ashlock looked a little closer and noticed that Diana was the only one giving off a fair amount of chi. Is she the only cultivator here? Ashlock thought back to the stories he read back on Earth and realized cultivators were usually rare. Most people had mortal bodies not fit for cultivation or simply never had the resources or guidance to pursue the path of immortality. Diana stopped in front of a store. A round man with a comical mustache approached Diana and gave a respectful bow which seemed to win him. Esteemed cultivator, welcome to my humble store. We do not take payment in spirit stones. Dragon crowns fine. Diana crossed her arms and glared at the man. Why, you must be joking. My monthly earnings aren't even a single dragon crown, how could I possibly? The man bowed again as he saw Diana raise a brow. I forgot that we recently started accepting spirit stones. Diana smirked and walked past the man who was almost twice her size in both height and width but looked like a scared cat as she passed. Ashlock couldn't follow Diana inside, so he surveyed the rest of the town while he waited for her to leave. Unfortunately, his view range only allowed him to see a section of the town closest to his peak. When I reach the next realm, I should be able to see many times further. Right. While Ashlock was soaring above the town with his skill, he spotted a marketplace. It was a large square with a river flowing through the middle. Brick arch bridges crossed a fast-flowing river every 20 meters. Ox-driven carts crossed the bridges to transport items from the market vendors to stores down the road. It seemed this was the hub for trade in the town. Listening to some conversations, Ashlock learned more about the people's simple lives here. One elderly farmer complained to younger women selling seeds about how bad the harvests had been this year and asked if he could have a discount. Please, Florence. You always cut me a good deal, right? Look at my old bones. This will likely be my last season tending to the rice paddies. The man leaned on the cart, and the young woman standing behind frowned. Mr. Richards, please keep your hands off my merchandise. There will be no discounts. I have a sick brother at home and can barely afford medicine. The woman then crossed her arms in annoyance. It's beast tide season, the merchants from the Celestial Empire haven't come around these parts in months. Beast tides. The old man spat to the side. Those good-for-nothing cultivators can deal with them while we flee. In my long life, this is the third time I've had to move to survive those darn beasts. Mr. Richards, don't disrespect the cultivators. The woman never finished her sentence as a figure came hurtling from the sky and obliterated her like squashing an insect. A man shrouded in green flames frowned at where he landed. Oops, I misjudged my landing. The man nervously chuckled as he shook his foot, trying to rid it of the sticky blood and bits of flesh that had once been the young woman. He then noticed the half-destroyed seed cart and asked, "Is this cart yours?" The old man absent-mindedly nodded, too shocked to form words. The green flame cultivator walked over to the old man and patted him on the shoulder, placing a few spirit stones in his open hand. I'm sorry for your loss, the cultivator said before turning and heading down the street. Ashlock noticed that the street led to the store where Diana was currently located. The old man blinked at the spirit stones in his hand and then at the half-destroyed cart overflowing with seeds. Thank you, Sir Cultivator, for your generosity. The man bowed, and the cultivator waved him off without looking back. The old man then pocketed the spirit stones with a sly smile, walked over to the cart, grabbed a bag, filled it with as many seeds as he could carry, and then with a grin, he set off toward his field, leaving the women's smashed corpse for the birds. Chapter 18, Winterwrath. Despite his numerous murders and consumption of human flesh, Ashlock couldn't help but feel outraged when he witnessed someone so indifferent to the death of an innocent stall owner. The sudden change in the attitude of the elderly man, who had previously disrespected cultivators, only served to highlight the backstabbing nature among the individuals of this world. Would Stella backstab me like that at the first opportunity? Ashlock wondered as he curiously followed the green flame cultivator with his skill. The man's flames had died down, and he wore a permanent scowl as he sauntered down the street. As if he was parting the Red Sea, people scrambled to get out of his way, and he snorted as a mortal tripped and fell, spilling everything they were carrying on the sidewalk. The man was about to pass by the store Diana was currently shopping in, but he paused mid-step, and his neck practically snapped in the direction of the store, and his eyes lit up as if he was trying to look through the building's walls. "There you are," the cultivator muttered and strode toward the door. Before the cultivator could open the door, the shop owner ran out. "Esteemed cultivator, welcome to my humble store. May you please wait out here for a moment." The round man with the comical mustache was practically bowing to his feet, and sweat dripped from his forehead. "There is another patron already inside." The man paid the store owner as much attention as one would a barking dog, and despite the round man's pleas, he tried to step past the large man. "Esteemed cultivator, it is store policy that only one cultivator can be present in the store at any given time. We do this to avoid fights and damage to the store." The cultivator scowled and looked down at the store owner. Despite being a rather large man himself, the store owner shrunk under the cultivator's intense glare. "Mortal, you dare order me around?" Green flames flickered to life across the cultivator's broad shoulders. He was easily over 2 meters tall, and his arms, thick as tree trunks, were on display since the white cloak he wore was sleeveless. "And no, I wouldn't dare." The store owner balled his fists at his side and clenched his teeth but refused to move. The cultivator furrowed his brows, then "Step aside. I have business with your patron." The shop owner stumbled as he was pulled backward, and from his aerial view Ashlock saw Diana emerge from the shop and stand in the doorway. Her arms were crossed under her chest, and her cold gray eyes glared at the cultivator. "Diana Ravenborn." The cultivator spread his arms wide and wore an overly fake smile. "Just the person I have been looking for." Diana tilted her head. "Wayne Evergreen, this is Ravenborn territory. You better have a great explanation for being here and threatening one of our taxpayers." Wayne's mysterious smile made Diana frown. "Diana, your family has flaunted the wealth of their spirit stone mines for far too long." Wayne clicked his fingers and crossed his arms as 2 green flame cultivators leapt from the roof and landed beside him, leaving cracks in the pavement. Blue flames shrouded Diana, and she took a step back. "Wayne, have you thought this through? Attacking the scion of a family on their own territory is a declaration of war." Wayne grinned. "You must not have heard the great news." He spread his arms wide as his grin widened. "My sister has married the scion of Winterwrath." Diana's face instantly fell. "So Evergreen and Winterwrath have allied?" "That's right." Wayne nodded, "and with our combined strength, the elders believe it's time to." A loud bell chimed across the city, followed by screams. Wayne looked over his shoulder and pursed his lips at the smoke-filled sky. "Appears they started without me. I'll read latest chapters at n/ovelbin.co/m." Wayne looked down at Diana with a crooked smile. "Now come with me." Diana summoned a silver blade and coated it in blue flames, quickly rolling to the side to avoid Wayne's green flame-empowered fist. The shockwave from the punch obliterated the shop front behind her, but Diana's short stature allowed her to easily avoid the homing fists of the evergreen cultivators. She stayed low to the ground, taking advantage of her agility and quick reflexes to evade their relentless attacks. As she moved, Diana searched for an opening to strike back. Ashlock watched the chaos from the sky. He could see cultivators with green and white flames destroying everything in the city. In the distance, he could see 5 balls of blue fire rocketing down the Ravenborn Peak toward the town, but they would arrive too late. Diana was surrounded on all sides. Diana and Wayne were evenly matched, both seemingly in the advanced stages of the soul fire realm. Wayne slammed his fists into the ground, causing the cultivator's chi to surge into the dirt beneath the paved street. Diana was agile and quick, using her techniques to evade and counterattack. She moved like water, slipping past the evergreen cultivator's brutal attacks and attempting to strike back. Despite her efforts, the evergreen cultivator's techniques seemed to shrug off all her attacks, their focus on hand-to-hand combat and defense, making them formidable opponents. The two sides fought fiercely, neither able to gain the upper hand despite the difference in number. As the battle raged on, Ashlock couldn't help but notice the evergreen cultivator's disorganized and chaotic fighting style. They were more of a hindrance to each other than a cohesive unit. Diana was making her way through the fray, her glowing blade a blur of silver as she aimed for the neck of an evergreen cultivator. Suddenly, a thick vine shot up from the ground, entangling Diana's leg and pulling her to the ground. Diana tried to swing her sword at the vine in a desperate attempt to break free, but a well-timed punch from an evergreen cultivator sent her blade off course and uselessly struck the ground. A second punch hit Diana square in the jaw, causing her head to rebound off the pavement, causing her to groan. But considering the impact left a dent in the stone, and Diana wasn't even bleeding, was a testament to how strong a cultivator's body was. More vines sprung from the ground and wrapped around all 4 of Diana's limbs. Wayne Evergreen had a ruthless grin with his hands still in the hole. Ashlock almost didn't want to watch anymore, the situation seemed hopeless. Diana's blue flames flared up and began to burn the vines, but her concentration wavered as two more punches hit her head from the two other Evergreen cultivators. There didn't appear to be much force behind the cultivators' attacks, as if they weren't trying to kill her. Do they want to take Diana as a hostage? Ashlock wondered as he watched. Is this how gods felt? Watching the mortals fight over petty matters. The skill did have God in the name. So maybe he was a god. A tree god. That was a funny thought, which certainly didn't match the situation. Ashlock was silently rooting for Diana. The Evergreen guy seemed like an asshole, and a small part of Ashlock hoped Diana might be better than these other cultivators. Maybe it was just a pipe dream, perhaps all cultivators were the same, but until Ashlock saw proof, he held on to his belief that there were some good seeds among the bad apples. Punches kept raining down on Diana and she screamed as she lashed around, trying to sever the roots or one of the cultivator's limbs. Blood leaked from her broken nose, and black bruises appeared all over her body. Ashlock wished he could help and at least make it a fair fight. This was too painful to watch. Ashlock debated leaving the scene to examine another area of the city where he could see smoke rising and people rushing away from burning buildings. You bastard. A voice Ashlock recognized as the store owner cried out, and Ashlock watched in amazement as the chubby man charged at Wayne Evergreen with a frying pan. He held it high over his head in a two-handed grip and, with a holler, brought it down with all his might upon Wayne's head. There was a resounding thud, but Wayne seemed entirely unaffected. Instead, he slowly turned to look at the chubby man with an angry expression. You insect. Wayne snarled and spat at the chubby man. The man exploded. Ashlock blinked. What just happened? Was that ball of spit empowered with chi? Was the difference between a soul fire cultivator and a mortal so great that they could die from being spat on? However, in that brief moment when Wayne had been distracted by the shopkeeper, Diana had managed to summon a dagger from her storage ring. Her grip was awkward, but she managed to throw it at Wayne's face with surprising speed and accuracy. Wayne's eyes widened when he saw the dagger coming for his face, and he instinctively cancelled out his technique that seemed to require his hands to remain in the ground and raise them to block. Luckily, he was too slow and the blade sunk into his cheek, causing him to stumble back while howling in pain. The vines lost their strength and burned instantly to Diana's flames without Wayne's chi powering them. Diana leapt to her feet and charged at one of the evergreens. He had similar features to Wayne, so they were clearly related, but he was a bit shorter and had a more square face. He raised his two hands and stood like a boxer with green flames flaring to life on his fists. The two exchanged a flurry of attacks. Diana spun around with her silver blade empowered with blue flames, but every slash she made was reflected with a well-timed punch. Diana breathed heavily and used her sword to keep herself upright as she clutched her broken nose. As the two evergreen cultivators closed in on the exhausted and bruised Diana, they both paused. Ashlock felt it too. The ground trembled. Something big was coming. Ashlock cast his attention to the far distance. It was just at the edge of his perception range, but once it appeared, he felt a chill down his non-existent spine, despite being so far away. An ice golem, 1,000 meters tall, emerged from the darkness of his vision range like a final boss taking center stage. Perched upon its shoulder was an albino man with scarlet eyes. He stood perfectly still like a statue, with a face unmoving. However, that wasn't all. A violent snowstorm of cataclysmic proportions flanked the ice golem and blocked out the sunlight for many miles. With every step the golem took, the ground trembled, and houses collapsed. Ashlock had no clue who the guy was, but he could make an educated guess. A higher-up of the Winterwrath family had arrived. Chapter 19, Peak of Power. Everyone seemed to pause and stare at the incoming calamity, even though supposedly on the same side as the new arrival. The Winterwrath elder standing upon the titanic ice golem shouted, Grand Elder Reborn. His words boomed for 1,000 miles. Ashlock knew the man's voice traveled that far since Ashlock's leaves rustled from the words, and he was 2 mountain peaks away. The 5 balls of blue fire charging down the Ravenborn mountain peak paused at the base, leaving the earth below them scorched. The fire dissipated and revealed 5 men with irate expressions. They all had cold gray eyes, midnight black hair, and narrow faces, except for one. The man who stood at the front of the 5 seemed a bit older with salt and pepper hair and some wrinkles, which was jarring compared to the other cultivator's perfect skin. Either this man is very old for a cultivator, or maybe he started cultivating later in life? Ashlock mused to himself. Is that even possible? All the men wore black robes that went all the way to the floor and had their hands clasped behind their backs. The golden ring of the elderly one at the front flashed with power, and a majestic sword materialized under his feet. It was a blade of obsidian, darker than night, with a golden trim around the handle. Ashlock had never seen such a beautiful personification of death before. Blue flames shrouded the blade in a density so great that it appeared like liquid fire. Finally, the sword rose and took the man into the sky. A Winterwrath dog dares to bark up this old man's tree? The Ravenborn Grand Elder's voice was like a silent whisper yet reached all who dared listen. He crossed his arms with a sneer. You may have been a relevant family back at the old sect that bordered the frozen lands, but since the beast tide forced us to move, you are nothing compared to me. The Ravenborn Grand Elder raised his wrinkled hand above his head. Wisps of blue flames left in droves and formed ravens of blue fire that flanked the Grand Elder and ignited the sky. Those who dare stand against the raven will fall. The Grand Elder then pointed a wavering finger toward the ice golem that loomed over the town under the Ravenborn's protection. The blue fire ravens 10 times the size of the Grand Elder shot forth at speeds bullets couldn't even dream of reaching. Sonic booms echoed out and caused windows to shatter and people to stumble below as the ravens slammed into the titan of ice, causing more explosions. The Winterwrath Grand Elder raised a brow as the ice golem trembled and stumbled back a mighty step. The attack had turned the golem into Swiss cheese, and one of its arms had become detached, crashing to the ground below and smashing an entire street of houses. Steam rose from the ice golem as blue fire melted the ice. The Winterwrath Grand Elder decided to abandon ship and summoned a sword of pure white that resembled a sharpened icicle and, like the Ravenborn Grand Elder, used it to fly high into the sky. Despite the situation and apparent overwhelming defeat, Ashlock found it strange how unperturbed the Winterwrath man appeared. His scarlet eyes casually looked at the Ravenborn Grand Elder as if he was a misbehaving child. White flames that had shrouded the Winterwrath Grand Elder dissipated. Then, like a puppet cut from its strings, the ice golem groaned as it began to crumble under its own weight. Then the golem exploded into many pieces that surged into the town below like an avalanche. Diana happened to be in the path of destruction. The evergreen cultivators were distracted for a moment as they watched a wave of ice 3 stories high hurtling toward them at breakneck speeds. Everything in the avalanche's path was obliterated, and the rubble of houses and corpses of mortals were ground up and joined the surge. The ground trembled, and everyone struggled to stay standing. Diana noticed an opportunity to pull a fast one on her opponents. With Wayne Evergreen still distracted with pulling out the dagger lodged into his cheek and downing healing pills, Diana charged at the remaining 2 evergreen cultivators, who were too busy looking at their impending doom. Diana was fast, agile, and graceful, whereas the evergreen cultivators were territorial and unmoving. In the face of an unstoppable force, the evergreen cultivators had no choice but to hunker down and brave the storm. Green flames solidified around their forms as they braced for the incoming avalanche. Diana dashed behind them, slashing at their tendons with a swift blade. Without a pause to witness the damage, she charged right at the avalanche, ignoring the howls of pain from behind. Ashlock watched in amazement as Diana brought her sword before her, and like Moses parting the Red Sea, the blue flames carved a path. It was narrow and ever-changing with the flow of the rubble, but she navigated the treacherous path with laser-like precision. Ashlock almost thought the woman had escaped her enemies, but, alas, Wayne seemed to have healed himself. Like a raging bull, the evergreen cultivator barreled down the newly created path after Diana and forcefully widened it when needed with his own might. As the game of cat and mouse began between 2 soul fire cultivators, the Star Core Grand Elders stood on their swords thousands of meters above and calmly stared at each other. Either the Ravenborn Grand Elder placed little value on the town full of mortals, or he had a fantastic poker face. Ashlock honestly couldn't read either of them, but the battle wouldn't end until one died, that much was certain. The Ravenborn Grand Elder made a hand gesture, and the blue flame ravens he was micromanaging that were still in existence even after decimating the ice golem were redirected. Some went to deal with the storm 100 miles long that was slowly encroaching on the land, while the others shot straight at the Winterwrath Grand Elder. The albino man with scarlet eyes seemed uninterested in the incoming attack. White flames lazily appeared on his arm, and he slapped the pitiful ravens away as if they were hapless birds. The ravens tumbled to the ground like broken toys. White flames ate away at the blue fire birds, corrupting them, and likely causing their connection to be cut. Grand Elder, you call me a barking dog yet guard the door of your home? The Winterwrath Grand Elder taunted and summoned a second light blue sword that flashed with power to his hand. If your pathetic excuse of a son was anything to go by, the renowned Ravenborn Grand Elder's skills with the sword may have dulled with old age. The man's scarlet eyes curved up in mock amusement. Come, face my blade. It's time the new generation strike down the old. To his credit, the Ravenborn Grand Elder didn't flinch or frown at the Winterwrath's provocation. Instead, his eyes grew colder and narrowed as if he were scouring the skyline for something. Your cheap tricks won't work on an old man like me. The Ravenborn Grand Elder began to retreat toward his mountain's peak, but the Winterwrath Grand Elder barreled forward with his knees bent slightly and the blue sword lowered to his side as if preparing to do an upwards cut. Ashlock almost thought the man teleported with how quickly he closed the gap. The Ravenborn Grand Elder cursed and summoned a second sword to defend himself. As the blades clashed, a wave of chi flattened all the buildings below for miles, sending the Ravenborn Grand Elder rocketing down as a ball of blue flames into the ground below. The dust settled as the Ravenborn Grand Elder emerged from the crater and rolled his shoulders. He seemed distracted by something, his gray eyes glancing over his shoulder at his mountain peak that towered behind him. Then he seemed to notice something, and Ashlock followed the gaze. Vines covered in green flames were slowly crawling up the peak like snakes. The man's eyes went wide. You sly bastard, you teamed up with the Evergreens, didn't you? The Ravenborn Grand Elder roared and jumped to the sky, only for the Winterwrath Grand Elder to smash him on the head with a brutal overhead slash, sending him hurtling back down into the hole for a second time. Stay down. The albino man sneered as he sheathed his blade. Watch as your mediocre descendants meet their end. The other 4 men that had come down with the Ravenborn Grand Elder were each busy trying to fend off green and white flame cultivators of similar strength from ascending the mountain. They were outmatched 2-1, and the green vines restricted their movement. Their defeat was inevitable. The Ravenborn Grand Elder took the skies once more, his poker face was long gone and replaced with a wrathful fury. His blade shone with power as he stepped and appeared in front of the Winterwrath man. The two exchanged a flurry of attacks, decimating the land below and sending echoes throughout the valley. They moved with such speed and violence Ashlock struggled to keep up with the combat. So this is the peak of power in this world. If just one of these people managed to invade Earth, they would become the world's undisputed king. Yet Stella said there were higher realms. How has this entire planet not been destroyed yet? How can the mortal people even survive? Ashlock suddenly felt very weak and small. What great power would he reach once he achieved the Star Core realm and was on the same level as the Grand Elders alongside his cheat-like skills? Then a horrifying realization dawned on Ashlock. These people can summon storms, fly at the speed of light, and obliterate towns with just the sound waves from their swords clashing, yet an entire sect of these people had to move due to a beast tide. Just how strong are the monsters in this world? Ashlock hoped he would never have to find out, but with rumors of one on the way, he may find out sooner than later. Latest. Chapter 20, Supernova. Throughout the intense flurry of attacks that decimated the surroundings, Ashlock believed the Winterwrath Grand Elder had the upper hand over the Ravenborn Grand Elder, which made the current situation more confusing. Within seconds the albino man lay on his back in a molten crater of blue fire with the tip of a black sword pressed against his neck. The Ravenborn Grand Elder gritted his teeth as he attempted to push the blade down to decapitate the man, but the Winterwrath Grand Elder held it millimeters from his neck with liquid white flames around his trembling hand, clasping the black blade. You come to my territory, destroy my land, threaten me and try to steal my spirit stone mines. The Ravenborn Grand Elder snarled and spat in his opponent's face. You are 100 years too early to face me, child. His salt and pepper hair seemed to flutter in an intense gale as if it defied gravity as he stood over his foolish opponent without a hint of weakness. The Ravenborn Grand Elder may have his opponent downed, but at what cost? From his vantage point, Ashlock could see the widespread destruction of the town at the base of the Ravenborn Peak. Smoke blanketed the sky as if trying to smother out the screams of the mortals as they ran from ablaze buildings and ruthless cultivators hell-bent on eliminating them just because they were under the rule of an opposing family. On the horizon, at the edge of Ashlock's vision range, a snowstorm descended on the land. Football-sized chunks of hail pummeled the town below, smashing buildings and pulverizing people. In the area the storm covered, Ashlock could see dots of blue flames surrounded by white and green flames. The Ravenborn cultivators were putting up a good fight, but they were heavily outnumbered by Winterwrath and Evergreen cultivators that had swarmed the town. It was only now that Ashlock understood the true scale of these families. He could count hundreds, if not thousands, of cultivators battling throughout the town. In fact, was it even a town? From the tiny bit Ashlock could see, he would call it a town, but for all he knew, it could extend for thousands of miles into the distance. Nevertheless, it was total chaos. During their godlike duel, the two Grand Elders had likely killed thousands of innocent bystanders, devastated family homes, and ruined livelihoods. Of the bit of the town Ashlock could see, almost half of it had been reduced to rubble. For example, Ashlock could see a woman on her knees with tears streaming down her face as she cradled a dead child in front of a half-destroyed bakery with a collapsed roof from a block of ice, likely from the ice golem that had been destroyed moments ago. A few feet away was a male corpse with a sword wound through his chest lying face down in a pool of blood, perhaps the woman's partner. And she wasn't the only one. Similar scenes could be seen all around. It was shocking and gruesome. But Ashlock felt nearly nothing. He may have been human once, but that was many years ago. His brain operated on human logic and reasoning but had the dulled emotions of a man-eating tree. It would be ridiculous for Ashlock to take the moral high ground over the cultivators and condemn their actions, especially after he has consumed so many people to fuel his strength. It was a hard truth to swallow, but this was a dog-eat-dog world with a different way of life than the one he had once called home. If he could choose, obviously, he would want no one to die. But that was a useless thought. He was a bystander, a mere observer, until he had the power to change things. Watching the situation from afar reminded Ashlock of the past. He had seen widespread destruction and misery on television after a devastating earthquake in some faraway country. But he had been numb to it, not even giving it a passing thought. But for some reason, the fact the destruction wasn't caused by tectonic shifts outside humans' control, but rather by two angry men fighting over a spirit stone mine angered Ashlock in ways that were hard to describe. It just felt so selfish. As an immortal tree, Ashlock had little care for human life. It was so fickle and would fade away eventually, and a new generation would take the place of the old. But ceaseless death over petty reasons didn't sit right with him. But what could he do? He was a small sapling at the peak of the Chi realm. He paled compared to these demigods that walked the same planet as him. It was frustrating to be weak. Visit novelban.com for updates. Ashlock suddenly didn't blame that elderly man that had stolen the seeds for his rude remarks about the cultivators. Evidently, they placed little worth on the mortals of this world and treated them as cattle to be farmed for taxes, so it was no wonder the mortals hoped they would die to the beast tides and leave them to live their mortal lives in peace. The tree's wandering thoughts were interrupted by the mountain trembling. Not his mountain but the Reborn peak. The pavilion that felt so close was being consumed by vines of green fire that crushed walls, grabbed people, and snapped them like twigs. The mortal servants were the first to perish, left to fend for themselves by their overlords. However, the weaker cultivators soon joined the servants in death, as few could contend against the attack nor escape as the entire mountain had been overwhelmed and consumed by vines. Only a few cultivators could stay alive, Diana's mother included. She stood defiantly in the courtyard of black trees, slashing at the relentless vines of green flames with her silver sword. She was enraged and screaming at a burly man with a straggly brown beard and fierce eyes that floated overhead. If his wild and buff appearance weren't a dead giveaway, the sickly green flames that poured out of him and into the vines below, alongside the crushing pressure he emitted on the surroundings, gave a clue that he was an evergreen cultivator and a powerful one, likely a Grand Elder. The evergreen Grand Elder didn't even give the angered woman a glance. Instead, his eyes were on the battle between the Winterwrath and Ravenborn Grand Elders. Then, noticing the Winterwrath Grand Elder had lost, he clicked his tongue. Useless bastard. Shooting down the peak, he arrived beside the Ravenborn Grand Elder, and before the old man could react, his fist, growing with liquid green flames, smashed into his face, sending the Ravenborn Grand Elder tumbling back. "I thought you said you could handle the old man." The evergreen Grand Elder sneered at the albino man. "Has the Winterwrath family really fallen so far? Perhaps marrying my daughter to your son was a mistake?" Ignoring the taunts and standing up, the Winterwrath Grand Elder brushed the dust off his white cloak. His scarlet eyes coldly looked in the direction the Ravenborn Grand Elder had gone flying. "Whoever said that old man had lost his edge is a fool." The evergreen Grand Elder snorted and drew his sword. "Guess we fight him to the death together then." A clang rang out, and the dust dissipated in a wave as two eyes of blue fire wrathfully glared at the evergreen Grand Elder. For the first time, the albino man showed fear. "He's going supernova." While the evergreen Grand Elder was still locked in a clash of swords, the Winterwrath Grand Elder didn't even attempt to assist his ally and instead dashed away, leaving after images and sonic booms as he went. Ashlock had never heard the term before, but considering they were star core cultivators and blue flames were flowing out of the Ravenborn Grand Elder's eyes, ears, mouth, and ass, he could guess where this was going. The Evergreen Grand Elder managed to smack the Ravenborn sword away, but the man didn't care. Despite being stabbed and slashed, the Ravenborn Grand Elder leapt onto the burly man and clung to him. The Ravenborn Grand Elder was now hard to look at. He was blindingly bright, like a human light bulb. His skin had started melting off, and it was clearly a suicide attack. The Evergreen Grand Elder screamed as the intense blue flames charred his skin and set his clothes alight. Then, as the Ravenborn Grand Elder turned to fiery sludge, the burly man broke free from the Ravenborn's grasp. Entomb! The burly man shouted, and the ground trembled as the crater rapidly filled in with earth and hardened into stone. Summoning his sword from his spatial ring, the Evergreen Grand Elder took to the skies while chugging a bottle of pills. He seemed to be heading straight up, as high as he could. At this point, the Winterwrath Grand Elder was long gone, very likely out of the range of the attack. Ashlock wondered how the cultivators such as Diana would survive the incoming attack. He saw that the tomb of stone had turned from a dull gray to a molten red, and a second later, it happened. The world went white, and Ashlock's Eye of the Tree God skill was abruptly cancelled. His vision returned to the pleasant courtyard, but the sky was gone. Instead of a pleasant blue with white fluffy clouds floating by, there was a blinding white. In the distance, a column of blue flames transcended into space. Huh. That's weird. The pavilion walls exploded as a superheated wave of air smashed into the mountain. It continued, decimating the courtyard and slamming into Ashlock, causing him to lose consciousness.